WXOS, WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, and KPNT HD2 Collinsville. 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. BK and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Bringing back the kickoff. He brought two back for touchdowns last year when he played for the Thundering Herd of Marshall, and he has one for Notre Dame. Or Carson Becky got hit again. The ball's out. R.J. Oben knocked it out. And Junior Tuialamaka has it for Notre Dame. Play fake. Leonard in the end zone. Touchdown Irish. Bo Collins with the first touchdown of this game.
That's what it sounded like last night on ESPN as Notre Dame takes down Georgia 23-10 in a game that was really ugly. Wasn't a whole lot of fun to watch. It was basically a couple of turnovers and then a kick return, and that ultimately determined the course of the game. Alex, here's a stat for you. There have been 45 teams in the last decade that have gained 240 or fewer yards and committed at least 10 penalties in that same game. 240 or fewer yards, 10 penalties in the game. And they did so against a ranked opponent, the way that Notre Dame did last night. Those last 45 teams to do so, 0-45.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then Notre Dame goes in last night and beats Georgia 23-10. Fluky, some would call it that. I would say they ended up out-executing Georgia. Neither offense was particularly good. Riley Leonard came up with just enough plays, especially with his legs. They ended up with 150 yards on the ground, and ultimately their defense won them the game. Defense and special teams ruled the day for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Alex, what did we learn from that one, though? We're now through the first two rounds of this new version of the college football playoff. What did we learn last night? What have we learned thus far from the college football playoff in your mind?
I mean, for the college football playoffs, I feel like we've learned that this season there is no superior team. Like, I think Ohio State is probably the best team right now left. And throughout the season, all of us were talking about Ohio State being kind of a poser more than anything. And the teams that we believed were the best, they've gotten beaten and kind of gotten beaten in ugly fashion. And I mean, Georgia is another example of that. I don't know if anybody believed Georgia was superior. They had flaws. But I think a lot of people viewed that as, well, Georgia's always going to show up. And they did not show up. I was not impressed by Gunnar Stockton in that game. Just overall, I feel like that's one takeaway. But we were talking about this. The other one is I think for college football playoffs, it's going to have to be re-ranking these rather than these bye teams, or maybe going 1 through 12 in terms of overall record.
So you're saying don't give the automatic bye to teams that win their conference championship.
Because I think when you look at Arizona State, although Arizona State had a pretty competitive game, when you look at Georgia and even Boise State, I feel like we could see a different look to the college football playoffs next year, and maybe you don't get these types of games early on if you re-rack things before you go into the college football playoffs rather than just having those buys for the conference champions.
The favorites in these games so far, 8-0 straight up, 7-1 against the spread. We have learned so far that the teams that Vegas expected to be better were indeed better. T-Bone, what's your biggest takeaway thus far?
This far for me, I would say it is they need to reseed. You know, I do think I didn't like the giving the buys to the conference champions in the first place, because you're going to end up with teams that, I mean, we knew it going into the year. The Big 12 ACC, odds are they're not going to have a team that's better than the second or even third best team from the Big 10 or the SEC on a given year. So I do think that is the one spot that they need to look at. But for the most part, you know, look, I was not a fan of the expanded playoff. I still think 12 is too many to get into the college football playoff. I think we saw that in the first round of these games. But I do think this was the perfect year to implement it. I will say this, just going specifically to last night's game. You know, for Notre Dame, to me, they proved they weren't a college football playoff championship contender. Looking at them, look, that defense is really good. The fact that they were able to slow down that run from Georgia while giving up like 20 to 30 pounds in the trenches, yeah, that's an impressive job by that defense. Offensively, though, you're going to have to put up more than 240 yards if you're going to be a team that ends up getting to the college football playoff. I think last night you learned Notre Dame's not a team that is going to be a threat for the college football championship. But, I mean, to Alex's point, I don't think there is a great team left, right? Ohio State, they look like the best team. I saw them lose to Michigan.
Yeah.
So
and their quarterback I don't trust.
Yeah, they clearly have some flaws. So it's a very open field still, even though we are down to the semifinals. But my quote yesterday of, hey, best value bet on the board was Notre Dame for the playoff championship, I hope you didn't listen because I changed my mind.
Yeah. I still feel like Notre Dame's an okay bet. I think Penn State would still be my favorite bet. That would be my team today. I would be like, you know what? If I'm going value, they're the team that I would point to. I think Ohio State's winning it all. I think Ohio State is the most talented team in the country. And to your guys' point on, like, the seeding needs to be revised, I was somebody that I wanted to see it play out first before I was willing to go there. Because I wasn't sure really how I felt about that going in. And I think sometimes it's okay to just say, like, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to play out, and that was my opinion going in. I now feel differently. I do agree with you guys. I think that they should take a look at that. I think they will. I think that's probably the first change that they'll make. And if they had gone with just the top 4 teams being the ones that got the byes this year, it would have been Oregon as your 1 seed, Georgia as the 2, Texas as your 3, and then Penn State as your 4. That feels right to me. I think Georgia still would have lost. I don't think that they would have advanced to the semifinal after watching what they did last night. But instead of Oregon having to play against Ohio State in the second round of the playoff, they would have gone up against, like, probably Indiana or Boise. That's a slightly different path than having to take on Ohio State in that second round. So that's probably the way that I would have gone about it. If they would have done that, I'm curious. This changes things a bit. Would you guys then have, like, number 1 Oregon plays against the lowest remaining seed? Or would it be Oregon kind of the way that it was this year, just whatever the draw is, similar to the NCAA tournament? So, like, Oregon would have faced off against the winner of the 8-9 game, which in this scenario, like I said, would have been that Indiana versus Boise State winner. So what would you prefer in that scenario? Would you prefer the reseeding going into the second round, or just bracket style the way that it was this year?
I would go reseeding into the second round. I think that's the better way to go about it. I've talked about in the NHL, they used to do that, to where every single round it would be resetting it and putting the top team versus the bottom team. That's the perks of being the number 1 team, the best team overall. You get the bottom dwellers. Does it go up against you? Yeah, probably at some times. But rather than worrying about the bye or just sticking with the bracket style, you're resetting that ranking system every single time. If a underdog finds a way to beat a top team, well, then they go up against the next top team.
Yeah, I think you should reseed when you get past the first round. I think every sports league should do that because I agree with what Alex said. If you earn the 1 seed, you should always face the worst team each playoff round.
Totally.
So, in that case, if it was the 12 seed, which ended up being Clemson, say they did pull off a stunner in round 1 against whoever the 5 would have been in the seeding spot, you should then get Clemson as the 1 seed, right? Like, that's the way it should work. I don't like the idea that they decided to just keep it going throughout the rounds, just a bracket style. I've never liked that through any sports league.
I kind of like the bracket. Yeah. I do. I think that it ends up becoming... I think it's something that over time we will start seeing, not to the same degree because it's not 64 teams the way that it was with the NCAA tournament, or 72, 68, whatever it ends up being over time. They just keep expanding the damn thing. But I do think that the bracket helps people be able to visualize, and I know this sounds so simplistic, and it is, but I think it helps people be able to visualize what we have coming up next. The other thing is, like, logistically, it can be a bit of a nightmare to not know until like 5 days in advance where you're going to be playing as a university. Like, if you're Ohio State, for example, and you're going up against, in this scenario, the 11 seed, who I think would have been like SMU, where are we going in the next round? It becomes very complicated to know that, whereas right now, with the way that bracketing is, if you're Tennessee versus Ohio State, you knew we will, if we win, be playing in the Rose Bowl. Let's get everything set in place to make sure that's ready to go. And I know some would say, like, hey, the NCAA should be in charge of that. Yeah, that's great in theory until the NCAA drops the ball on everything, as they always tend to do. So I do think sometimes the logistics of all of this stuff needs to be kept in mind. I would also, and this is not something I think is going to happen soon, I think we saw there was a bit lacking in terms of the environments at this round's game compared to what it was in the first round where you were on the campuses. I think it's okay for the semifinal and the final to be played in a bowl matchup in a neutral site. I would like the quarterfinals and then certainly that first round. I would like all of those games to be played on the campuses at which they are supposed to be played. So that way, especially for the teams that earn that bye, you should get an opportunity to play at home before you end up in the bracket style going to a bowl style matchup. So that's one other thing that I would like to see revised. That will not be happening this soon. That is something that's going to take probably a few years, but there were tickets literally available at game time for these things.
Well, you went through the prices on Tuesday.
Venues, other than the one game between Ohio State versus Oregon. Like that one ended up being sold out. But other than that, those venues were not completely full at the time of kickoff for those games. So that's something I think that they're going to have to look into. It's just too much. You have that first round, and then so you're asking some of these teams, especially the teams that went to their conference championship games, please buy tickets to these neutral site conference championship games. 2 weeks later, please buy tickets to these neutral site quarterfinal games. 3 weeks later, please buy tickets to these neutral site semifinal games. And then another week later, please buy tickets to the championship game. That is 4 huge games that you're having to buy tickets to as a fan, all of which are expensive, all of which require travel, all of which require you to get the hotels and the airfare and everything. It's just a lot to ask while you're also asking your fans to subsidize the payroll for your teams.
Yeah.
So eventually I think that's going to become too much, and they will have to do that as well. But as we sit here today, I think this was a success. I know that the games overall were not maybe as exciting or as close as some would have liked. We got one excellent game out of it, and that's a win. Out of the first 8 games that we saw played, one of them was excellent, and that was Texas versus Arizona State. Previously, we had none of these games. That would have been Texas versus Arizona State in a previous iteration of the format would have been like the, Sugar Bowl or something, or the Fiesta Bowl. And now it's something that we get to see in a college football playoff format. So that, to me, makes it worthwhile.
And maybe I'm off on this. I think if you see these teams properly, you maybe get more than just one good game, right? Like Penn State's path so far. This isn't a disrespect to Boise or SMU. Penn State should not have played SMU in the first round. They should have had a bye. Boise State, who knows if they're even on that side of the bracket if this thing is seeded properly. So, you look at that, I think part of the reason that we've seen uncompetitive games is because we've seen teams that haven't been seeded properly. Ohio State Georgia, or Notre Dame, falls into a top 4 team, right? They shouldn't have played Indiana in the first round, and I know that game ended up being a 10-point game. That was a blowout.
Like Indiana versus Boise. I think that would have been close.
Very much so, yeah.
Tennessee versus SMU. I think Tennessee would have taken care of business in that one after seeing those 2 teams, but who knows?
Probably, I think it would have been more competitive.
Ohio State versus Arizona. Not sure. I think Ohio State probably would have taken advantage of them pretty big, but who knows? Notre Dame versus Clemson. I think Notre Dame would have beat them pretty good in that one. So maybe we wouldn't have gotten better games in that first round. Who knows? But I do think it gave us a better chance of getting better matchups in that first round. And then in the second round, I think what it really does is it sets up for a potential Oregon matchup versus somebody really good in that semifinal, as opposed to seeing them get their ass kicked in the quarterfinal against Ohio State. So I think it's worthwhile to reseed these things. I also think we need to keep in mind the old version of the college football playoff was generally speaking blowouts as well. So
yeah, especially that first round.
This is the way of the college football playoff. This is the reality that we live in with college football. What we have now is Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, and Notre Dame. None of the top 4 seeds remain as we go into the semifinal. The 4 final teams. Final question that I've got for you guys as we're talking about the college football playoff. Do you think that we are seeing the start of what will be 4 of the top coaches moving forward in college football? Now that we're into kind of almost a new era with Saban retiring, the old guard kind of going out, Sark, Marcus Freeman, Ryan Day, James Franklin. Is this the potential start of that era of college football? Or is this just like, these are the 4 final coaches, and kind of like college basketball, sometimes you get a weird Final Four?
I think it's the latter. Because I would still have Dan Lanning in there, the Oregon head coach, is one of the top ones. And honestly, I'm not going to take Kirby Smart out after 1 year. I think those 2 are going to be in that conversation. Replace who you prefer. Like it or not, Ryan Day is going to be there, even with all of the heat around him, and then with James Franklin. I think if you see a little bit more of Texas doing this next year, a little bit more of Notre Dame continuing this in terms of consistency, then you'll have them in that conversation. But for right now, this just feels like one of those Final Fours where you get a couple of surprise teams.
I think Sark and Marcus Freeman are in.
Oh, really?
I think they're part of the new guard.
Freeman's the one to me that I'm not
Freeman's
sure.
the one I'm not sure.
Really?
for whatever reason, I still don't feel great about Marcus Freeman. And I know he's got this team to the college football playoff. He's recruited a hell of a roster. I want to see him do it
Doesn't
again.
it feel a little bit like, though, he's taken advantage of just a poor overall college football group of teams, too?
So. I think this team's really good, man. And I think they did a really good job in the portal. Getting Riley Leonard, he has clearly fit exactly what they needed at the quarterback position. I could totally end up being wrong, and you guys could be right to be skeptical. It's typically better to be slow on this stuff than early. I think Marcus Freeman is a hell of a football coach. Keeping that team together after that loss against Northern Illinois, that told me a little something about who he is as a coach, because that team could have folded, man. That would have been an easy opportunity for them to, like Florida State. Their season went off of the rails after they had a couple of bad losses. Meanwhile, he was able to keep it on the rails, and he's done a really good job of getting that team to be the fully formed version of what they were potentially going to be. And now I think they've got a shot to be able to go win the national title. I wouldn't pick them, but they've got a shot to. So kudos to him. All right, he's Alex Ferrario. That is Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Big college football game last night, setting up for the Final Four. Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Ohio State. Those games will be played a week from yesterday. Thursday night for the Orange Bowl, and then Friday night for the Cotton Bowl. It's going to be interesting to see what the attendance looks like for those games as well, as we get Thursday and Friday night games after watching those teams already for 2 weeks travel. Be an interesting spot for some of those fans. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get to our football pick-em. T-Bone can't pick any college games this week, so we'll see what he's got in store for us coming up in about 15 minutes or so, or at least no big college games. I suppose he can go to bowl games. Well, let's be honest, we know T-Bone's not doing that. Coming up next, how are the Blues going to be able to pull off a 6-2 or 7-1 stretch? Our own Joey Vitale said that's exactly what they need to do. How do they get it done? We'll ask Alex next here on 101 ESPN.
St. Louis Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with the First Community pre- and post-game show.
First Community Credit Union, calling St. Louis home for 90 years and powered by Scott Lee Heating Company.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
They got to put a 6-0 run together. They got to put up 8-2. They got to put up 9-3. They have to put some facet of that together in order to make a really hard push after the Four Nations tournament. And this is the time. I think 7 out of the next 8, if I remember right, are all against non-playoff teams. You know, tough test against the Ottawa Senators, but then you go to Columbus. You have some winnable games here in the coming future. And with the teams they're playing against, to me, over these next 8 games, can you find a 6-2? Can you get to a 7-1? Because that's what it's going to take them to make a realistic push towards the end.
That was Joey Vitale on with us yesterday talking about why the Blues need to go on a run here. Now, we all know it, Alex. This is a team that's mostly been right around 500 for the vast majority of the season. They've got a back-to-back opportunity. After this weekend, they will officially be halfway through the regular season. You got to start putting together some wins. And you've got about a month to be able to do it prior to the Four Nations face-off. That break begins on February 8th. You get 2 weeks off, and then boom, time for the stretch run leading into the deadline, and then ultimately the end of the regular season. You've got a real chance here with some of these teams that are coming up. First, it's against really winnable games. You got Ottawa and then Columbus, Minnesota. Minnesota's good. Anaheim, Columbus. You got to start racking up some points there. And then you start getting into games against direct threats for Western Conference playoff spots. Calgary twice, Vegas twice, Utah, Dallas, Vancouver, Colorado. These are the teams that you've got to start racking up wins against, because each game is basically a 4-point swing one way or the other. So I was listening, earlier today, Alex. We were listening to the Spit and Chicklets podcast, and they were talking a little bit about the Blues coming off of their Winter Classic victory. They were all in attendance to be able to see that one, and they said something that I'm curious if you're feeling the same way about this team right now. Let's take a listen.
Boys, do you get the feeling that the Blues, if they sneak in with a wild card, they could be a dark horse team? I'm starting to get feelings. I got the butterflies in my stomach for this team. The fact that they make the Fowler move. I think that their back end has wily veterans. Broberg's a young guy who adds that, great two-way puck-moving defenseman. Binnington, when you're playing for keeps, the fucking snowman's going to show up. The guy's got ice in his veins. He's going to be going off to Four Nations. I think one of the issues has been goal scoring, but I think that they can find a way, especially later in the season where things get a little bit rougher and it's harder to score goals. Like that Jake Neighbors has no problem going to the blue paint. He's a complete throwback. We talked about Schenner. Kyrou Thomas is healthy after getting injured at the start of the year.
What Biz just mentioned there is why I think they can do it. Because right around, I don't want to say right after the Winter Classic, but in the middle of January, early February is where games start to really tighten up. Teams start to play more playoff style, and you don't see the 7-8 goal games like you see the open offense that is right now. And that's unfortunately how the Blues kind of have to play, because they don't have those game-breaking talent, ability shots, whether it is, the way Dylan Holloway's been playing, or Jake Neighbors, as they mentioned, is playing. That's the style you're going to have to play. Do you guys know the last time that the Blues were 2 games above 500?
Oh, God. Has it happened this year?
It's happened this year.
Okay.
The last time that this team was 2 games above 500. No, I don't even think they were 3-1, to be honest with you. No, it was October 24th. They were 5-3. It was after they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. They have not been 2 games above 500 since. I've referenced it plenty of times. They have not won 3 consecutive games yet this season. You've got to do all of those in this month. You go back, and not to compare them to the 2019 Cup team, because they're not that team. But
who knows? We'll see.
That's when they started to play winning hockey, though. January 10th was where they started to string some wins together. And then, of course, it was January 23rd that they went on that 11-game win streak. But you go back and talk to any of those players, you can reference it was around the LA Kings, Anaheim Ducks, Columbus Blue Jackets realm, mid-January, where they started to feel confident in their game. This is a winnable schedule. You have 1 set of back-to-backs, which start today. You have a lot of games on home ice with a lot of days off in between. There's no excuse for not being rested. There's no excuse for travel schedule. This all plays in your favor. And if you can go 5-6 consecutive wins, or you win 7 out of 8 of 9, you're playing all of these teams that are in the same spot as you. Every team that's fighting for a wild card spot or in a wild card spot right now, the Dallas Stars, the Vancouver Canucks, the Calgary Flames, Utah Hockey Club, Blues, Seattle Kraken. They are all playing 500 hockey in their last 10. Somebody in that group of teams has to say, bleep this, we're the better team in the Western Conference. And guess what? You play Calgary twice, Utah once, Vegas twice, Vancouver once. You've got your opportunity to plant the flag in the Western Conference wildcard race and say, nope, we're going to be a playoff team. And I do agree with Bissonnette and the Chicklets guys. We all agree. If they get into the playoffs, Bennington can steal a series. The question is, can you get into the playoffs? And if you go 500 or less in the month of January, then we're done talking about it. Then we're talking about trading assets and talking about draft picks. But if you can win January, 5 or 6 games above 500, now you're talking.
I think it all comes down to the goal scoring. Like, I think that's another place where I agree with Biss, is like, you look at what they did in December. Kyrou, Holloway, Thomas, and Buchnevich. Those 4 guys combined. Your 4 best goal scorers. I think we all agree with that right now.
Yeah.
25 goals in 14 games between those 4 players. Every other player on your roster combined, 18 goals in those 14 games. Now, you expect your best players to be the best guys on the roster, and that's what they've been. Like, those guys have really carried you. Kyrou over his last 14 games, 12 points plus 5. Dylan Holloway in December, 13 points plus 3. Thomas, 19 points in 14 games, was a plus 13 on the ice. And then Booch was second on the team in plus minus in the month of December. He had a plus 9. So your best dudes are playing at the highest possible level right now. Even defensively, like Cam Fowler, Colton Parayko, and Broberg, they're all playing really well. They've all got a great plus minus over the month. It's the rest of the roster that's got to start stepping up, man. It's everybody else. It's what more can you get from Texier? What more can you get out of Jake Neighbors? What more can you get from like a Joseph, or maybe Brandon Saad eventually will start contributing, I don't know, something, considering he had 0 goals in the month of December and was a -6 for the entirety of the month over the course of 11 games. That's brutal, man. You've got to start getting more, especially out of that middle 6 portion of your lineup. If they can't start contributing more, that's when you start to see this team not only go around 500, potentially though go below 500 for this month, because you can't keep expecting these guys on the top of your lineup to produce the way that they are. Eventually, they're going to go through some dry spells, and that's where other guys have to step up.
Yeah, I've got like 4 guys that I'm kind of looking at that they need to have a good month for this team to be in the playoff conversation. You mentioned one of them in Jake Neighbors. I think Zach Bolduc has to fall into this conversation. You need a third line that can be a scoring threat. Brandon Saad, you mentioned, and Justin Falk. Montgomery said that, dealing with a little bit of an injury, so they're not sure if he's going to play tonight or not. You need Justin Falk. You need more of what he did in the Winter Classic, picking up a goal and picking up an assist, whether it be on the power play or at 5-on-5. 2 of your last 3 games, your defensemen have scored 3 goals. That's awesome. But you need more from your forwards to go beyond that. So your top line and even 5 of your top 6, they've been fine. You need that next depth of scoring, and if they're not going to contribute, then Doug Armstrong acts accordingly to go out and find somebody who can, or you hope that a Dvorsky's ready to contribute.
So that's what I was about to say. I think Dvorsky has to be the first step, and then the second step is if they don't start contributing, I don't think you're going to be able to get to the deadline to where you're in it.
Yeah.
In the way that you need to be in order for Army to go make that big move.
Which may force you to be aggressive now, though.
I don't think they're going to. I think their aggressive move right now was Fowler.
Probably.
That was them stopping the bleeding and saying, we can't keep doing this the way that we are with Suter being in the top 4.
Yeah.
We've got to find a way to stop the bleeding there and give ourselves a chance to get to March still in this thing. And now it's about, okay, we believe in the internal options. Go do it. Go show us that we need to be aggressive. Army always talks about this. The team will tell me what I need to do once we get to March. When we get to the deadline time, they will dictate what I decide to do there. And he clearly views this as a playoff team. They've got to show him that they are capable of doing that. To me, it's a few guys that I would pinpoint. Shin, Neighbors, Saad. Those 3 guys, they will determine what this team is capable of at the deadline. For better or for worse. And ultimately, it comes down to, can they get it done? Those guys, Shin and Neighbors especially, haven't necessarily been bad. They've just got to score more.
Yeah.
2 goals apiece in the entire month of December.
Shen's just not scoring. Shen's contributing to the offense, which I'm not so upset about that one. And Jake Neighbor, I think what what Biz said on that cut from the Chicklets podcast, I think he's absolutely right. Jake Neighbors, go back and look at what he did last season. Like, it was typically that second half where he started to rack up those points.
It's time.
That's where that style of hockey starts to win, because other teams don't allow you to make those goals off of the rush. And that's why I think Neighbors will be fine, but you've got to have that next layer of scoring, because other teams will find a way to eliminate those top guys. Your next layer of scoring has to contribute at some point.
He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Blues back in action this evening. You'll hear it right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Blues versus the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa coming in a back-to-back situation. They were embarrassed last night, according to Brady Tkachuk.
13 shots on goal.
Goalie in net for this one, so expect a pretty impressive showing, especially in that first period for the Blues. They have decided not to announce who their starting goalie will be going into this one. They want a little bit of that competitive advantage, so we'll see who starts in net. We'll see if Justin Falk's able to go. Back in action this evening. Alex's pregame starting at 6 o'clock. Coming up in the 12 o'clock hour, we will talk to Mike McKenna and a prospect analyst for the Daily Faceoff, who's going to tell us what he has seen from Dalibor Dvorsky in this year's World Juniors. That's all coming up in the 12 o'clock hour. Coming up next, it's time for our football pick'em. It's coming down to the wire between me and T-Bone. Who is he going to go with in our final week of the Pick'em Challenge this year? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Coverage of 101 ESPN is presented by Onder Law Injury Lawyers. GetJim.com.
Starts with you. Always call 811 and wait for any underground lines to be marked.
Always keep safety in the back of your mind. Just stay humble.
For more information, go to farmsafe811.org.
Game 1, Packers and Bears. Game 2, Chiefs and Broncos. Game 3, Vikings and Lions. Coverage starts Sunday morning at 11:30. Your destination for the NFL in St. Louis is 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues back in town after rocking Chicago. Good morning. I'm Bradford Bruns with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. On the heels of Tuesday's Winter Classic victory at Wrigley Field, St. Louis will host Atlantic Division foe Ottawa tonight. Your pregame set for 6 p.m. right here. Note forward Jordan Kyrou has scored 9 goals since December 3rd, while Sens captain Brady Tkachuk boasts 17 tallies overall. Other Center Central Pacific evening matchups include Canadians Blackhawks plus Preds Canucks. College hoops, Illinois rolls past Oregon 109-77. Notre Dame slays Georgia 23-10 CFP style. This SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
He's had a really nice month. He's got 12 points over the first 3 weeks of our Pick'em Challenge. 6-3 overall. If you're betting with Alex right now, you're making yourself
lose early,
nice
win
coin.
late.
T-Bone has 8 points over the first 3 weeks. He is 5-4 overall. I've been doing really well with my my 3-point plays.
Yeah.
And that's about all I can say. I am 3-6 overall. I have 6 points. I've got a lot of work to do to be able to get back into this thing. Again, Alex sitting pretty. T-Bone's in a better spot. I am in a not-so-great spot right now. We don't have a lot of choices going into this week,
T-Bone.
boys.
Ooh, it's the NFL.
College football playoff didn't do us any favors by playing their games prior to the weekend. The NFL, a lot of teams have stuff already wrapped up. There's some games that are in question right now where you're playing it pretty risky if you're going with a certain side, depending on if they're going to play their starters or not. So a lot of risk going into this weekend. You got to avoid the landmines. That's the #1 goal of the week.
Reminder.
Avoid the landmines.
Reminder, BK, the first week of picks, they were all NFL games, and T-Bone didn't do too good. The next week of picks, there were college football games, and T-Bone was able to gain ground. This time around, no safety net for our boy T-Bone Steak over there.
Unless he wants to choose a college football bowl game, which we know he says don't count. They're not real games.
It's true.
So if he picks one, I think we should just not count the points.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Because they're fake.
Yeah, he doesn't even watch his own team bowl game.
His only chance to do so is Buffalo versus Liberty, with Buffalo as a 3-point favorite.
There's two tonight. We got Virginia
Minnesota
Tech
versus Virginia Tech, and Texas State versus North Texas in a barn burner of a first responder bowl.
But none of
Do you
those
guys know where that bowl is played?
Texas.
Good call. Yeah, Dallas.
I have no idea.
T-Bone has I'm like, no clue. Man.
Yeah, I think you're right, BK. I agree with this. In 2 out of 3 wins, T-Bone, these points don't matter if you pick a bowl game.
All right. Alex, we're getting you started first. You have basically nothing to play for this week. You get 1 point.
Yeah.
You end up locking this thing up.
Yeah.
What is your 1-point play for?
I'm going to T-Bone's Rams team because still something to play for, taking on the Seattle Seahawks, and I like the Rams at +6.5. Because this is in L.A. too, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm a little... Nope, I'm not going to say the phrase that always bites you in this one. I like the Rams against the Seahawks +6.5.
Do you want me to tell him, or do you want to tell him?
I'll tell them because it is my team. They will not be playing any of their starters this week. Sean McVay says,
Fine.
Seating's on the line. I don't care. It's better for me to go in completely healthy. That's why I don't like the Rams winning
Fine by me. I'll have to keep it close. 6.5.
All right.
T-Bone, your 1-point
Here's
play?
my concerned face, by the way.
Yeah, I see that.
My 1-point play this week, look, I ain't touching those bowl games, man. Those things don't matter. And you know why I know that? Because Cam Ward quit at halftime. So my 1-point play, I'm going Packers -10 against the Chicago Bears. Sounds like LaFleur's going to get his guys some series, if not play the entire game. I think they're going to play the entire game, and they're just a much better team than the Bears. The Bears are going to be that classic team that counts out in their huddle. All right, Cancun on 3. 1, 2, 3, Cancun. So Packers -10. Not worry about. That's my 1-point play.
I agree with you. They should be playing for seeding in this one as well because, they've got the potential to rise up to that 6 seed depending on what happens with the Commanders, and I think it's advantageous for them to be able to get up there. Playing against the Rams or the Bucks for that 3 seed, a little better than playing against the Philadelphia Eagles as the 7 seed. So I'm with you. I like that pick. I think the Packers should be playing for seeding there. All right, my 1-point play, man. This is a tough one because I've got to be a little strategic in what I choose here. I've got to try to avoid the games that you guys are going with to be able to give myself the best chance possible to win. Here we go. You ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
There have been
Texas?
3 teams that have been favored by at least 20 points in the last decade.
Whoa.
One of them is this weekend. The Baltimore Ravens are a 20-point favorite.
Unbelievable.
Against the Cleveland Browns and Bailey Zappi, who is expected to start at quarterback for the Browns this weekend. I will take the Baltimore Ravens as a 20-point favorite to cover this spread. 2 of the last 3 that have been favored by 20-plus have been able to cover the spread. We'll see if the Ravens are able to add themselves to this list. I'm not exactly saying it with my chest, but I think they win.
Yeah, you really aren't saying that with your chest, are you? I don't like that for somebody who has to get every single one of them right. But you're bold because I can tell you one thing, buddy. I don't have that in my 2 or 3 point play.
I know they're going to play their starters. They have to play for seeding. They're going all out to win this game. That's basically all I got. And they're much better than the Browns. The Browns are quiet quitting on the season.
Well, that's why I kind of like it. Because I think the Browns, if they're not in that in the first quarter, they'll just give up. And that's why I kind of like the 20-point spread, even though it is big.
Well, 2-point play for me, a team that also still has something to play for because they got to worry about another team in their conference. I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers minus 14. Home game against the Saints. You talk about giving up on a season. They literally don't have anybody that's playing worth starting. Tampa Bay, of course, needs to get that victory to keep Atlanta out of the conversation. 2-touchdown game. I like minus 14 for Tampa.
That was one of my choices. I decided to go with the Ravens instead, and the reason why was because I figured somebody would probably take the Buccaneers minus the 14 points.
Yeah. Well, welcome to my 3-point play because I have the Bucs minus 14 points. Everything that you said. They've got to play for something. Yep. The Saints aren't playing for anything. I love that. I know it's 14. If there was that hook there, if it was 14.5, I'd probably avoid it. I think they're going to kill the Saints. I love that play. That's why it's my 3-point pick.
All right, my 2-point play. Sticking with the Saturday game. Steelers at home against the Cincinnati Bengals. You guys know exactly where I need to be. I'm right back home with my boy Joe Burrow. He is going to win this game on Saturday night. As a 2.5-point favorite, they will win this game by a touchdown. They will win on Saturday night. And they will think to themselves, man, we've got a chance. And then they will see the Miami Dolphins lose on Sunday and think to themselves, man, I've really got a chance. And then they will see the Kansas City Chiefs lay down on Sunday with Carson Wentz not even playing in the second half. They're going to have Chris Oladokun. You guys didn't even know that was a real name. He's the Chiefs' third-string quarterback. He's expected to play the second half on Sunday. The Chiefs will lay down against the Denver Broncos, lose that game, and the Bengals will miss out on the postseason as a result. But I do think that the Bengals will win on Saturday as a 2.5-point favorite on the road. They win by 7, and I win this bet.
T-Bone, if you don't mind me interjecting, you might have to change that, buddy, because that's my 3-point play.
That's all right. I don't care about you. T-Bone's the one that I need to be.
Oh, okay. Well, everything BK said, I second.
I don't like that pick. I do not think the Bengals win this week. I think they get eliminated before they have to even worry about that game on Sunday where you'll have the Chiefs rolling over like a dog. So my 2-point play, I'm going with the Washington Commanders minus 6 against the Cowboys. Dan Quinn says everybody's playing, and if that's the case, they are a much better football team than Dallas, and it is not as big a spread as double digits like we've had for multiple picks so far here. So I love the Commanders minus 6 against the Cowboys.
All right. Last one up. I was wondering if maybe you guys would take this game. I've spent all year doubting Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, jeez.
And on Sunday night, on the road, against the Detroit Lions, team that we all came into the season thinking they're the best team in the NFL. No siree. Not anymore. They have no defense to speak of. They have even more injuries coming off of last week, including their number 1 cornerback. They will be attempting to play man-to-man all night long against Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and they will get shredded apart. This is going to be one of the most fun games that we will watch all NFL season. It's going to be up and down and up and down. You guys remember that Rams versus Chiefs game a few years ago? The one that was supposed to be played in Mexico City and ended up being played in LA. It's one of the best games that we've seen in recent memory, and the reason why is because both teams had real expectations, and there were points scored galore. That is what we will see in this game, and the Minnesota Vikings will come out victorious on the road against the Detroit Lions. They will lock up the number 1 seed and the first round bye, proving all of us, especially myself, incorrect. Give me the Vikings plus 2.5. Give me them on the money line as they win on Sunday night against the Minnesota Vikings.
I like the 2.5. I don't like the money line. I would pick the Lions in this one. I think it's a shootout, and I think the Lions show why they still have a shot to get to the Super Bowl because of their offense against that good of a defense.
I like Lions minus 2.5 in this one because I think it's going to be a one-score game, and give me the Lions. Yeah. I think they're going to end up being the better team in this one, even though the defense has questions.
What will hurt the Lions, though, is not having David Montgomery.
Yeah.
Because like the dual threat of the running game is why I think they're so dangerous. But I think Montgomery's going to be back.
Yeah, you can beat the Vikings on the ground, but you ain't going to beat them through the air.
Jahmyr Gibbs is incredible, though, and I think he will find a way to outplay Minnesota.
I think he's going to be a big factor in this one. I don't think the Vikings are going to shut down the Lions. I think the Lions are going to get plenty. Like they're going to score like 24 points in this game, 24-27. I just think the Vikings are scoring 30+. I don't know how the Lions get stops. It's why I'm so nervous about them in the playoffs, and I think it starts right here. If I'm nervous about the Lions once they play legit postseason teams, I've got to say the exact same thing about what they're doing right now, where they're going against a legit postseason team. So that's where I'm at. Our picks going into this weekend, Alex is well ahead of the field. He's got the Rams plus 6.5. He's got the Bucks minus 14 and the Bengals minus 2.5. Those are his three plays. T-Bone has the Packers, the Commanders, and the Bucks. I am going with the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Minnesota Vikings. Whether you want to fade us, whether you want to follow us, you can do that over on the Circa Sportsbook app in the state of Illinois. That is the exclusive odds provider here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to be joined by the former NHL goalie, Mike McKenna. He joins us each and every Friday. He will talk to us about what he wants to see from the Blues as we approach the second half of this NHL season. But coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything, sports or otherwise, on BK and Ferrario.
Start your day with the morning after on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Tim McKernan, Doug Vaughn, and Martin Kilcoy. Listen to TMA weekday mornings from 7 to 11 a.m. on 101 ESPN. The morning after is presented by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. TMA? Then nominate yourself to be the Morning After Listener of the Month. Sign up now at 101ESPN.com or TMASTL.com.
The TMA Listener of the Month Club is quenched by Milagro Tequila. Welcome to a brighter side of tequila with Milagro Tequila.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers on 101 ESPN.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, we'll get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line or on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. All right, let's start out with this. Alex, Happy New Year.
Shut up.
What is your favorite New Year's Eve thing to do? Is there an activity or something that you guys prefer to do on New Year's Eve?
And I love watching Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve.
Of course.
I watch it every year, man. I've been doing it since I was like 5 years old. Always watch it. And then always complain about the acts that they have and think that this is terrible.
Yeah.
Although they did have Carrie Underwood on this year, and it was actually pretty good.
Me and T-Bone, I think, spend New Year's Eve pretty similarly. We play board games with our families, our friends. This year we did it with friends, but I love playing board games on New Year's Eve. I love board games in general. I'm relatively competitive, as you guys probably can imagine. I do not like losing. I do not take it well, so I continue to play the game over and over until I win. But yeah.
You don't sound like you're a fun person to play board games with.
I really enjoy playing
We're
board
playing
games.
Clue again, damn it. I'm not going to lose.
We played Blocus 4 times on Saturday night.
This one was a weird...
That's a good one.
This one was a weird New Year's Eve, though, because, like, Katie and I were in Chicago. So, like, you know, we weren't home to do what we typically do. Because, like, yeah, we'll watch TV. Like, we'll watch movies. We'll play board games or something like that. This one was just an odd one because we were in Chicago and we didn't know what to do.
We had the college football game on, and then we played Blocus. We had a bunch of kids with us, so hung out with them until they went to bed, and then that's when we played Blocus, to be clear, in case anybody was curious. I actually parent my child.
You won the 4th game, and then you guys were done.
No, I won the 3rd, and each of us had won 1 at that point, so we had to play a 4th to see who got the winning game. So my wife won, which was very infuriating.
He slept on the couch.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. From the 314, do you guys think that the recent dominance of the SEC in college football is coming to an end after seeing how all of these college football games played out over the last week or two? I think that the dominance that they have had is over. I think them being the best college football conference will continue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I think the way Georgia and Alabama, they not only were the best teams on a regular basis, they were always the best teams. I think that is going to be harder and harder to continue to sustain over time as we get further into the NIL and transfer era. I think that we have already started to see that. The depth is just harder to accumulate. You used to be able to, if you were Nick Saban, have 3 deep of 4 and 5-star players. Now, if those guys aren't playing after year 1 or year 2, they're transferring and going elsewhere. Like this year, Mizzou had Darius Smith, a defensive end, on their roster until he got hurt in the preseason. Former 4-star recruit that went to Georgia, played a little bit for them there, and he was like, well, I'm never going to get my opportunity, so he went to Mizzou. Hell, Jared Verse, now St. Louis Rams defensive end. He was at Georgia.
Rams.
Excuse me.
Unbelievable.
I can't believe I just did that.
Freaking believable.
LA Rams, my apologies. He was at Georgia for his first 2 seasons, went to Florida State for a year, showed out there, became a first-round pick, ended up going to the NFL. Yeah. So, like, that's the kind of stuff that did not take place a few years ago, and I think it's really changing the sustainability of that dominance in college football.
Yeah, I think the SEC is always going to be the best conference because it does the best in recruiting, and it's just so deep, right? I mean, like you look at like the Big Ten. The Big Ten is very much a top 3, top 4 conference where the top 3-4 teams are usually typically one of the best in the country, but then there's that significant drop off. Like this year, it was 3 deep. Indiana was kind of in a second tier compared to Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon. SEC, I mean, they have like 7 or 8 really good teams. I think that will always sustain itself because everybody still wants to go to the SEC and play. But I do agree. I think the dominance of that conference, I mean, you're seeing it this year. I don't think that is going to be there. I think there will be years or stretches where one team, whether it be like Texas or Georgia or Alabama, maybe goes on like a 3-year run of dominance. I don't think it's going to be just consistently every single year we're going to see an SEC school get to the college football playoff final.
All right, Alex, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 314. If you were able to listen to every sport that you wanted to, but you could only watch one sport, what would it be for the rest of your life? What would be the one sport that you could watch, everything else you can only listen to on the radio?
I originally thought that was going to be an easy one, but the more I think about it, I enjoy listening to hockey on the radio. The one sport that I don't enjoy listening to on the radio is football. Like, I have to watch football to enjoy it. Like, because we were driving back from Chicago on New Year's Day, and so I was listening to those bowl games. It's just not the same. It's not the same as watching the football game, because originally I'm thinking I'm going to pick hockey. Like, hockey's my sport. I love watching hockey. But, man, there's a lot of really incredible broadcasters for hockey. I can listen to that on the radio. I think I would pick football.
And baseball's the easiest one for me.
Oh, yeah,
to
baseball's
watch.
easy.
I think it's a great radio broadcast.
I agree.
Like, you can sit outside in the summer, listen to it on the radio. I think it's an excellent
I agree.
It's a game that you can listen to easily, and there's so much downtime. So I think baseball translates the easiest and the best to the radio. So that one for me is an easy one to go out the window. So it really comes down to, like, professionally, we kind of need to watch hockey, but I would watch football. That would be the one. It would be really hard for me to give up my Sundays watching the Red Zone channel.
I was just thinking of that. Like, I can't imagine what would my Sunday be. I'm sitting by the fireplace listening to a football game.
Alex is different than us on this, T-Bone, I know, but like if I can never watch another college or junior hockey game, that'd be fine for me. It's really just the NHL that I'm missing out on. Now, it sucked to not have the Olympics. That's another thing that would be brutal. Yeah, that's true. But if I give up basketball, I'm giving up the NBA and college. If I'm giving up football, I'm giving up the 2 biggest sports in the world right, or at least in America right now in terms of viewership, which is the NFL and college football. I think it was 72 of the top 100 most viewed shows this year were football. That came out just a little bit ago.
And how brutal would it be, like, during a Super Bowl? Everyone's having a Super Bowl party. And you're like, oh, I got to listen to it. You guys all come over. I'll have a lot of food, and we'll listen to it on the radio.
What is this, 1940?
That'd be tough. All right, 314-399-9646.
Do you hear the commercials on the radio for the Super Bowl?
To get involved in the show, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL is where you can go to watch us as well. Alex, we'll get to this one real quick before we talk to our friend and Blues insider, former NHL goalie Mike McKenna here in just a little bit. Who do you think will be the next Blues player to have their number retired? It would have been Petro.
It would have been Petro. I don't think Vladdy gets his. I'm torn between Steen and Binnington.
I would go Benner.
But if Keith Tkachuk goes into the Hall of Fame, which he will go into the Hall of Fame, I actually think you have to retire his number. Right now, it's like semi-retired, but it's like Berenson and it's Tkachuk, and then there's another one that I'm completely blanking on right now. It's like semi-retired. I think if Tkachuk goes into the Hall of Fame, they retire that one. But if it's not him, probably Benner, because I don't know if you can retire Steen's number as a GM.
Benner having these opportunities with Team Canada is really going to help his potential Hall of Fame case.
If he gets a gold medal next year with Team Canada on top of a Four Nations tournament, he's been an All-Star, he's won a Stanley Cup, you get a gold medal. There's not a lot of guys who have been able to do all of those. I think Bouwmeester's the other one.
Because it's the Hockey Hall of Fame, not the NHL Hall of Fame. Correct. And so your international accomplishments matter. They're kind of similar to basketball. Yeah. I think Benner, that would be my choice.
If Steen wasn't the GM, I think it would be Steen for how long he played here, the points that he's put up, and then, of course, the Stanley Cup, him being such a pivotal piece of it. But because he's going to be the general manager of the team, that's probably going to have to wait until he's done his overall career. So I would say, if not Tkachuk, Binnington.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Bradford Bruns back in the studio for us today. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center, and Mike McKenna is going to join us coming up next to break things down. All things St. Louis Blues as we head into the second half of the season. Mike McKenna next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week.
Shout out to Doug DeLeo of St. Peters, Missouri. He was named our new 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now to be the next 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week and take home a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Learn more at 101ESPN.com.
Between the Pipes is refreshed by Macadoodle Spirits, fine wine, beer, and cigars. Now open in Garden Prairie.
We're almost halfway through the Blues regular season. That is what will take place this weekend. We'll hit the halfway point, and we're talking it over with Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie. He joins us each and every Friday here on the show. It's always presented by our friends with Macadoodles. He joins us via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Mike, we appreciate the time as always, my friend. How was your New Year?
Well, it was pretty uneventful in a great way. We were down at Old Kinderhook with the Kirkwood Mites and it felt like a couple hundred people down there just in a in-house tournament kind of jamboree. And I think I made it to 11:45. How about you guys? How late did you make it on New Year's?
Well, I didn't get back to the hotel from the Winter Classic, Mike, until about 8:45, and I don't think we ate dinner till 10:30. So I made it to like 12:30, man. So I was actually able to celebrate New Year's.
I've never been more surprised by anything in my entire life than Alex Ferrario making it past the ball drop.
I mean, look, Mike, in my defense, I was a popsicle from that Winter Classic, so 45 minutes of that little window to midnight was spent standing in the shower trying to defrost.
Well, that's a lot of information. But I tell you what.
Sorry.
You know what? It was really cool, though, to be able to sit down as an entire youth hockey organization with all the Mites and watch the Winter Classic together. We had all the kids in a lobby at Kinderhook, and, some of the kids had been out on the ice just skating between periods and then coming in. And, we talked about this last week a little bit that, I really haven't had this fan connection to the game in so long that now I'm starting to get these little glimmers of what it was like and what I experienced as a kid, whether I'm at a bar watching a game, restaurant, or whether we're all together, at a youth tournament watching it. It's just, you just almost forget how fun it is to watch in a group setting, and then to have the Blues just absolutely wax the Hawks is it's about as good as it gets for everybody there, man. It's a pretty happy group.
It was a hell of a lot of fun to watch, and the Blues now are starting to stretch where you've got some winnable games coming up. You've got Ottawa on the back half of a back-to-back. Sounds like they're going to be going with their backup goalie in tonight's game. And then you've got Columbus, Anaheim, Columbus again. Those are 4 of your next 5 matchups. We talked yesterday to Joey Vitale, as we're talking right now with Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie, and he said, hey, at some point here, you're going to need to win 7 out of 8. Go 6-2 in a stretch because you've really got to get back into this thing if you're going to plan to get into the postseason. Do you think they're capable of that, Mike? Does this team have a run like that in them?
I think with Jim Montgomery coaching them, it could happen. The problem is that even if you string one that's a 7, let's say you win 7 of 8, right? Or maybe you win 8 out of 10. You're still going to need to do that again at some point, right? And you got to be consistent the rest of the way. And this is something I can remember when I was playing, that you'd look at the standings and you think, man, we're not in bad shape. We're only, 6 points out of a playoff spot or something like that. Well, you start to realize pretty quickly there's only so much runway, and it's tough to hop over other clubs. And, right now, where are the Blues? Hey, 4 points out. Well, Vancouver's got two games at hand on them there. And, Dallas has a couple as well, even though they're right there. It's tough to do. But the Blues still have things that they have to accomplish to get there, and we see signs of life. We see them play well against the Hawks. How are they going to be against the big teams coming up? They got to get through the lighter teams. But, boy, they got to improve in certain areas, guys. I keep thinking about special teams. That's the one, fellas. It's just got to get better. If that happens, then who knows?
Mike, on that special teams front, power play wise, you watch the games and it feels like they're generating momentum, but they're still not finishing those opportunities. What's missing on this power play?
Well, it's been fun to watch this year because they feel like they moved the puck pretty well. I don't know if you guys have that same impression. There have been times where they've crossed the seam twice. The puck's moved at a big clip. But I still think that there's a little bit of a directness missing to the game, and frankly, just not having bodies being planted right in front of that cage, making life miserable on the other goalie. Again, we said it before, you only have so many Jake Neighbors or Braden Shen types. And when you're trying to put together a power play unit, where's your heaviness in front of the net? Who's it going to be? And that's tough because when Kairu's out there, when Thomas is out there, they can move the puck as well as anybody. But at some point, there's still a grit factor to a power play.
And it's probably helped to have Falk back in the mix. It's nice to see him get a goal. Who knows if he's going to play again tonight, right? He's going to be game time decision. I don't know if you guys have reported whether he's going to be in or not, but I still think they're missing a little bit on the back end offensively. Fowler's helped that. He could help that on the power play. He has shown it. But more than anything, I think they just need to be a little bit more direct, get in the goalie's eyes and make it tough on him.
I do want to ask you about a potential decision that the Blues are going to have to make at some point here this year, which is on Dalibor Dvorsky. He's been absolutely dominant at times in the World Juniors. 5 games. He's got 5 goals, 9 points overall in his 27 games in the AHL this year. He's got 11 goals already, 21 points. Mike, it seems like he's starting to develop. Now, they have said all along they're not going to rush this thing. He's going to take as long as he needs in the AHL to make sure he's ready to go by the time that the Blues bring him up to the NHL level. What do you think the timeline looks like on that? Have you seen anything from the World Juniors that would indicate one way or the other if he's getting closer to being ready for the NHL level?
Well, I mean, compared to even training camp, there's been big strides. You learn how to play at a pro level. And when you head back to World Juniors, it looks like men against boys, man. Like, really, that's kind of what it turns into from a skill set, from a puck management. I think his trajectory right now screams a player that's going to be NHL ready next season. For me, I still don't think you want to rush it. I totally agree with the Blues, but Dvorsky's ready for a cameo. You know, if you're clipping along almost point a game pace in the American League, if you're scoring as often as he has been, especially knowing that the Blues are going to have space in the middle, that there are some injuries that people are out, at some point here, he's going to get that 4, 5, 6 game cameo. And that's what I think it needs to be. Unless he comes in and goes point a game and he's undeniable, give him a taste, then get him back to the American League and make sure he's ready. If they go, make sure he's ready for the stretch for those guys, playoff run if it's there. Let him dominate that league for a year and then come in and earn it in training camp. Because to me, he's right on the cusp.
Do you give him a little bit of a taste, Mike? Would you give him a little bit of a taste right after this World Juniors tournament, or would you wait a little bit longer?
I think it's really going to be when the right timing is. To promote somebody is always tough right off the bat. I mean, for me, you're looking down the middle of the Blues, and who are we going to take out of this spot? There's options now, but there's space. So I don't think you do it right out of World Juniors. You got to let a player calm down a little bit from that, and also playing against, frankly, 20 years or younger, right? Like, he needs to go back to the American League. He needs to get, in my eyes, through the All-Star time and break for that. Get him through that and then see what happens, man. And this is just a classic case of a player that could get called up after the deadline, when you're not getting hurt on waivers and call-ups and stuff like that. He'd be a perfect example for that.
Mike McKenna joining us for just another minute or two here on 101 ESPN. Mike, last question that I've got for you, and it pertains to the goaltending situation. They're not going to announce, at least as of right now, who they're going with tonight. Could be Hofer, could be Binner, but over the next 2 days we'll see both of them. So it's really kind of a moot point on that one. How do you think they approach it after that, though? Because you got Minnesota, which is a big game for the Blues, and then you've got kind of this stretch run. How would you be approaching the goaltending situation over the next couple of weeks?
Well, we talked about last time, or maybe it was 2 times ago, I guess we were on here a couple of weeks, that I'd go to a rotation. Well, I mean, how good was Bennington in the Winter Classic first? Like, just
unbelievable.
Awesome. Just when the chips are down, and I don't look at his stats, I think he's given really good hockey to the team this year. But I do think that it's been heavy. And, you're looking at January here, and he could legitimately run the table. Bennington could, right? Like, there's no, aside from tonight and tomorrow, there's not another single back-to-back the rest of the month. So you're going to have Bennington with a lot of rest here, and I think you're going to need to look to him playing 2 out of every 3 games, really. If you think about a week-long stretch, can you do 3 games in 7 days every single week? You could. Man, I'd sure like to see Hofer play at least one of those games. I don't think you have to rotate, but I do think you need to be kind of judicious in how you do it and try to get Hofer into, like I say, probably 1 out of every 3 games for at least the month of January here to get closer to that stretch.
Mike, one more, and it's kind of like a goalie scouting report here. I think you played with Anton Forsberg back in the day in the National Hockey League. He's going tonight. Can I get a goalie scouting report on Anton Forsberg?
Fapa. We call him Fapa. It's because
okay, yes.
I played with him in Springfield when he first came across the pond to the American League. Pretty
right.
detailed goaltender. He's fairly technical in how he plays. He unfortunately has a history of getting hurt a decent amount. Maybe not the most dynamic goaltender, but steady. So basically what I'm saying, a goaltender like that, obviously you got to get anybody moving, but on Forsberg especially, you got to elevate the puck. He's got incredible legs. He's got good width to his butterfly. But he tends to, if any criticism, he tends to lock up and block a little bit. So for the Blues to score, they got to move it east-west. They got to elevate, try to get that puck above them.
I'm saying goal in the first 5 minutes tonight for the Blues.
And who's it going to be? Come on, give it to us right now.
Jake Neighbors.
I'm going Broberg. This guy's got to get one again here. It's going to get going. The D got to get going. Yeah, Broberg. He's going to toss one in.
Activate the D.
Activate the D. Big D, we like to call him, Mike.
That's a different guy.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
Holloway.
Big B.
Yeah, there you go.
Big D? Big D plays forward with us on Friday mornings at Kirkwood. Not sure how he got the nickname.
All right, Mike. We are always talking to you each and every Friday. We are presented by Macadoodles when you join us. What do you guys have going on right now? I know it was the holiday season. What do we have post January 1st out there at Macadoodles?
Well, I tell you what, we still have some bubbly in stock left over from the holidays. We still have all the bourbons and all the tequilas and everything else. But the big thing that's going in, we just did a big reset, and we have NA products featured, non-alcoholic products. We've got beers from The Athletic, you name it, man. Like if there's a non-alcoholic beer that's produced, we're bringing it in this month for dry January. We know people are looking for it. We also have one of the widest THC drink selections in town. We've got things from 2 milligram to 3 to 5 milligram on up to 10 milligram. You do not have to purchase those at a dispensary. You can purchase them right here at Macadoodles. We've got them cold in the cooler. We've got them warm on the shelves, and it's the same way with all our NA products. We even have NA wine. Okay, so we're trying to take care of all that during this month of January, get everybody through, get to the Super Bowl, and then we can all let it rip again.
Oh, yes.
T-Bone, you hear that? It's ready to go for you.
Let it
As
rip.
you go through your dry January, it's ready to go for you out there at Macadoodles.
Let it
They
rip,
got
T-Bone.
everything you could possibly ask for. Mike, appreciate the time as always, my friend. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. We'll talk with you again next week.
You got it. We'll talk then. Thanks, fellas. Everybody have a good one.
Absolutely. As Mike McKenna joining us as he does each and every Friday here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate his time as always. They do, Alex, we went out there a couple weeks ago. They've got an unbelievable selection of NA drinks, and that's super cool, especially this time of the year, as I know a lot of you are probably going through that dry January. Really cool spot to be able to get that. That's Macadoodles out in Darden Prairie. Be sure to check them out. In 15 minutes, we're going to be joined to talk a little bit more about Dalibor Dvorsky and all of the Blues prospects. They've got like 100 of them playing in the World Juniors right now. Stephen Ellis is the prospect analyst for the Daily Faceoff. He's going to join us in 15 minutes to break down where Dvorsky's at in his development right now, how far away he is from the NHL level. Stephen Ellis in 15 minutes gives us all of that. But coming up next, there's a new team that might be emerging as a potential contender for Nolan Arenado as the world turns with Nolan Arenado next year on 101 ESPN.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm.
dinner on Sunday evening, January 19th at the Missouri Athletic Club downtown, celebrating the top performers from last season and honoring the legacy of those who have made long-lasting contributions to the Cardinals organization. Tickets are on sale now for what will surely be a memorable night for St. Louis baseball fans. Get all the details and get entered to win that pair of tickets for the St. Louis Baseball Writers Dinner now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Powered by the Schaefer Door Company.
Broadcasting live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
All right, Alex, so I saw a report yesterday, and my immediate thought was, that's the team. That's the one that's going to be interested in Nolan Arenado. The Angels, according to John Heyman of the New York Post, are interested in Pete Alonso. Why? Nobody really knows. Nobody totally understands why they would be interested in Pete Alonso. This feels like a team that should be going into a full-blown tank mode. Like, eventually they just have to take their medicine and say, you know what? It hasn't worked for us. We need to get some of these bad contracts off the books. We'll sit out of free agency while we try to get to a place that is a better health for our organization long term. They're never going to do that, though. They decided to go out there and spend some money on pitching. Now they're potentially interested again in Pete Alonso. Alex, we've already heard there's potential connections between the Angels and Nolan Arenado. The geography of it makes a lot of sense. He could potentially go home where he's from, which is in LA. And if they end up signing Pete Alonso, I at least could see, if you really squint your eyes, tilt a little bit to the left, I could see how Nolan Arenado could convince himself, even if he's dead ass wrong, but he could convince himself, hey, the Angels could be interesting this year. Maybe they could be a place where I could contend. And if nothing else, at least I'm back home. Alex, does this kind of pique your interest as a Cardinals fan?
I don't buy that it happens. I think Pete Alonso is the signing that they do, and then that's it. Because I don't think they're going to spend the money to bring in a Nolan Arenado on top of the Pete Alonso. They're already 8th in payroll for the upcoming season, and you're telling me you bring in Pete Alonso, that's going to probably put you 6th or 7th. And then you bring in, and I know they're going to be eating some money. We're talking, about $15, $20 million of Nolan Arenado?
25,
but that's still going to put you in the top 5. You're telling me the Angels are going to be top 5 in payroll?
Dude, they have not shied away from spending over the years. That is not something that they are fearful of. They are willing to pay if it creates a contender. And honestly, most of the time, even if it doesn't create a contender, they're like, yeah, we'll go ahead and give it a shot. We'll see what this looks like.
Unless the Cardinals are going to do a sweetheart deal with them just so they can get off of it, meaning eat a lot of money, I don't see. If they get Pete Alonso, I think that's their move. And then it's going to be, now Nolan Arenado's not going to the Angels.
That's kind of how I feel, but I could see where they convinced themselves. Look, they've wanted to get out of the Rendon deal for a while now. Granted, you're not going to take that deal back in return, but I think there's a chance they just eat the money on Rendon and go, okay, well, now we've got third base open. Now what do we do? And I can see where they look at Arenado. They'll kind of sell the hometown to him and say, hey, look, you want to be out west? I could see a scenario where it plays out, although the connection to Alonso is the thing that makes me go, are they really going to bring in, $40 to $50 million more just for this year and then the next 2 to 3 years? Because Alonso's going to get a 3 to 5 year deal, would be my guess, around $20 to $30 million. Yep. And then you've got $20 million on top of Arenado. But, it's the Angels. If they did something I'll just say what it is, stupid.
Yeah.
It wouldn't shock me.
I get it.
Art Moreno is one of the worst owners in all of professional sports. So I could see a scenario where the Angels start calling and say, hey, can we bring in Nolan Arenado? I think they were a team that would make sense for Jack Flaherty to sell the same thing, right? Hey, you're a West Coast boy. Why not just come here and play for us?
We can't be with the Dodgers, so why not come to us?
You know what might be interesting for them? I don't know that they'll do it. They've got an interesting pipeline right now. They do have some rising prospects. That's the kind of team I could see doing a Nolan Arenado plus Eric Fetty deal, where they need somebody that can come in, and to your point, Alex, they don't want to spend too much money. So instead of going out and getting Jack Flaherty, who's a better pitcher, I fully acknowledge that, but they already signed Yusei Kikuchi, who's got some of that swing and miss stuff. Again, not to the same level as Jack Flaherty, but you sign Kikuchi, you trade for Eric Fetty. There's a decent middle of the rotation, at least potentially. And then you bring in Arenado and then maybe sign as well somebody like Pete Alonso. They already added Jorge Soler this offseason. You've added a lot of power to the middle of that order with Pete Alonso and Soler. Now you add in Arenado, who's going to at least hit for a high average as well. You've got, if Mike Trout can stay healthy, you've got Mike Trout in the middle of the order, Taylor Ward towards the top of it. Like, okay, I see the vision at least of how that becomes interesting. I don't see any vision, any scenario in which that's a real contender, but could they win 85 games? I guess. And now if you get a couple of bounces that go your way, maybe you end up in the postseason. And that's something that hasn't happened for the Angels, since 2014, I think. So, yeah, if you're them and you just say, hey, we want to get back to playoff baseball. We want to get back to being relevant in the city again. I guess I can see how you get yourself there. It's just a lot to spend to be relevant. It's one thing if you're spending that and you're like, okay, don't feel great about it, but at least we're a real contender and we can convince ourselves that we can win a World Series this year. You can't do that if you're the Angels.
Imagine being an owner of that baseball team and being like, well, we couldn't get to the playoffs with Trout and Shohei, but maybe we'll get to the playoffs with Trout and Arenado and Alonso, and then we'll get Jack Flaherty too.
Somebody from the 515. BK really on a roll today, really making bleep up.
Oh, wow.
I'm not making anything
You're pulling your best Nick Wright.
Stop it. First of all, it was reported by John Denton of Cardinals.com that the Angels were one of the teams that he would potentially approve a trade to. So they're always kind of on the back burner as at least an option because of that. And then when you see a report out there that they're potentially interested in Pete Alonso, okay, well, it would suggest to me at least they're interested in contending next year, and they want to get better. They want to improve in the middle of their order. That's the only reason why you would go make this signing for Pete Alonso. It does feel like a step too far to go get Pete Alonso and Nolan Arenado, but I've also never considered the Angels to be one of the smart teams in Major League Baseball, so who knows? Maybe they would do that. The other thing is, hey, if they've got money to make this kind of a bid for Pete Alonso, maybe their pivot would be Nolan Arenado. Maybe they say, okay, we're going to try to get Pete Alonso, but if he says no, what else can we go out there and do? Maybe it's Bregman. Maybe it becomes Nolan Arenado. But those are kind of the three guys that are currently available that we know of at least, that at least teams like this can convince themselves of, okay, this helps us compete at a higher level going into next year with one of our corner infield spots being locked up for the foreseeable future.
And I can also see where if you're the Angels, we've talked about, honestly, I kind of get this if you're the Angels, because if you're in their spot, you look at the AL West and it feels vulnerable, right? I mean, the NL Central feels vulnerable. It's why I went on a little bit of a rant yesterday, like how the hell have the Cardinals not spent a penny so far this offseason, and why are they not trying to do a total offseason? You look at that AL West, Astros aren't the same team. I think they're still going to be competitive, but I mean, they're let Bregman walk. They just traded Kyle Tucker, and their pivot was Christian Walker. You look at the Seattle Mariners, they've done nothing in the offseason so far, though they have great pitching. Their offense has been a problem. It continues to be a problem. And then you look at the rest of the AL West. Okay, sure, the whatever they are, A's, they just paid Luis Severino. They're still a ways away. We're right here in this mix for this division. So if you're the Angels, I could see how you convince yourself, man, we can go out there, we can add pieces like an Alonso or maybe an Arenado, and maybe we believe that gives us the amount of necessary pieces to get us just to win this division, because it's probably going to take, 88 wins. Would it shock you if that's what it took to win the AL West?
No, or at least get in. Like, you could potentially get into the postseason with that. I mean, we saw last year, what did the Tigers get in with, like 84, 85, something like that?
They're barely above 500.
It's not going to be some crazy high bar to clear. So it's just one of those things where right now, as we're watching for what the Cardinals are going to do this offseason, the topic is not so much what they're going to add. So, yeah, I'm going to be paying attention all offseason to who the teams could be that emerge as suitors for Nolan Arenado. It's the number one storyline of the Cardinals offseason. So I know people get frustrated with all of the different updates and all of the non-stories that become stories. And, man, this is where we're at with the St. Louis Cardinals. So I'm going to continue giving you guys the updates. That's all we could do here as we continue along this offseason. Coming up in 15 minutes, time for the junk drawer. But next, Stephen Ellis is a prospect analyst for the Daily Faceoff. He's been breaking everything down as we watch it happen at the World Juniors. What has he seen specifically from Dalibor Dvorsky? How far away does he think he is from the NHL level? We'll talk to Stephen Ellis about that next year on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this day back in 2009, the Blues would beat the Columbus Blue Jackets to pick up their 15th win of the season. A 5-2 final score as Brad Winchester scored on the power play. B.J. Crombeen scored shorthanded all in the first period. Columbus would tie things up. Then 3 unanswered goals. Keith Tkachuk on the power play, T.J. Oshie on the power play, and Alex Steen on the power play for a Blues 5-2 winner.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, ClassicAirCare.com. .101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues return home on a mini roll. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update powered by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Fresh off Tuesday's 6-2 triumph over Chicago at Wrigley Field, St. Louis resumes its Enterprise Center schedule tonight. Eastern Conference challenger Ottawa arrives for that 7 o'clock puck drop right here. Jim Montgomery's bunch has won 3 of 4. Brady Tkachuk's Sens, meanwhile, 9-4 since December 5th. College football, Notre Dame downs Georgia, advancing to next week's Orange Bowl. Texas, Ohio State plus Penn State round out your CFP Final Four. Later, local hardwood action finds SLU hosting St. Joseph's tomorrow. Mizzou visits second-ranked Auburn. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. The Blues have, I think it's something like 100 prospects that are participating in the World Juniors this year. I think it's actually 9, if I'm not mistaken.
No. Stick with 100. That makes sense. The entire World Junior rosters of all of the countries is represented by the Blues.
Yesterday in the upset, there were literally, I think, 4 of them.
Go Czechia. You guys, nonstop. Every single line and defense is taken care of by the Blues.
The headliner, of course, is Dalibor Dvorsky, who has 9 points so far in the World Juniors, has looked really good. Is somehow still a minus on the ice, so that's something that I want to talk to Stephen Ellis about. He's joining us via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Stephen Ellis writes about the prospects. He's an analyst for them over at the DailyFaceoff. Follow him on Twitter at @SEllisHockey. @SEllisHockey. He's joining us now on BK and Ferrario. Stephen, thanks so much for the time today, man. I know it's a crazy busy time as the World Juniors are taking place. Let's start out with Dalibor Dvorsky, who's the headliner for the St. Louis Blues in this tournament. What have you seen from him thus far, and what does it tell you about where he's at on his development path?
Well, at some point, I think they're going to have to rename this tournament after him, because how many times has he played in this? 4,000 times? Like, I remember when he was 16 years old and making waves at the Hlinka Gretzky, and to see him play as good as he is now has been really good. And I heading into this tournament, it was clear that if Slovakia was going to make any noise, it was going to be because of the play of Dalibor Dvorsky, and he was going to have to be so important as this returning player, as a guy who's having a really good year in the AHL, better year than I thought. Like, he's on pace, even if all this missed time, for over 50 points, which is very hard for a 19-year-old to do. But seeing what he's been able to accomplish with Slovakia, where especially that 4-point game a couple days ago, I believe against Kazakhstan, he's such a skilled player that when he's on, he's able to do anything out there. He's able to play a really good two-way game. He's got that speed, the skill, and then the numbers are there. So he's not going to finish as the top scorer, as we still have a couple more games to go, but 9 points in 5 games, that was the best showing we've seen from him at this tournament.
Stephen, I feel like when you watch a player in the World Juniors, if he dominates against players that are his age, you can kind of say, like, okay, he's ready for that next step. We've seen him in the AHL this season kind of be a point-per-game player. In terms of that two-way style, I think everybody agrees the offense is there. Does that two-way style feel like it's at the point where it could compete at the NHL, or does it still feel like there's work in progress?
I still think there's a bit of work in progress. Like, I feel like there were points where I wanted to see him just move a little bit more in the defensive zone, but I also think that he was kind of just a do-it-all guy for Slovakia because they didn't have a ton of skilled guys, and it wasn't an easy tournament for them. They struggled a lot, and so it's this tournament in particular, it's a small sample size of what a player is capable, right? And it's a different role than what we'll probably see from him going forward in the AHL, moving forward to the NHL. But what I still think is this is a guy that should be able to go out there and get 50 points a year, be someone that the Blues are going to be able to rely on, and just, again, almost always one of the best players in his age group, and he's done it on a team that hasn't always given him a lot of skill and a lot of other good line mates over the last couple of years.
When you think about player comps for the NHL, I know some prospects analysts hate doing this because it basically pegs you into, okay, this is what he's going to be, and there's always a range of outcomes here. But whether you're thinking stylistically or what it looks like when he gets to the NHL level, if it hits the way that everybody hopes that it does, what do you think Dvorsky's best comparison could be once he gets to the NHL level?
I could say there's a bit of Bo Horvat in him there. It's a guy that when you really need to generate some offense, you need to generate some opportunities and go out there and get some shots in it. He's a guy you can rely on. And, like, I remember back at the Hlinka Gretzky a couple of years ago when Canada did not participate, and that's like the summer U18 tournament. It's a really good scouting showcase. And the whole talk of that event was Matvei Michkov and how he was able to go and dominate of Russia. Well, Dvorsky was just as good, if not better, in that tournament. And he was the reason Slovakia went all the way to the final when no one saw that coming. So this is a player that has always had to be a leader offensively for his team, and it's translated to the pro levels where you could throw him out there and he's going to make something happen. And you look at the numbers. They've been great in the AHL.
Stephen, there's a couple of other guys that have been really good in this tournament, and two of them have been Jakub Stancil for Slovakia and Juraj Pekarčík, who, of course, plays on that Slovakia team with Dvorsky. What have you seen from those two?
Well, Pekarčík, that's a guy that him and Dvorsky have been longtime friends. Saw them at the U18s a couple years ago in Switzerland, and they were one of the best duos. They were the reason why Slovakia actually made it to the bronze medal game to play against Canada when it didn't look like they would get that far whatsoever. They went out there and beat Finland, partly because of how well those two guys played. And we saw that chemistry here again, where they were just relying on each other. They were feeding each other all game long. And you look at the numbers for him, too. Very good there. When you look at what Stansel did, a goal per game in this tournament, I think he's been a really key part. He looked really good against Kazakhstan. I know it is Kazakhstan, but if you're going to get points, might as well get a lot more than the rest of the players in your team, right? But I think that for a Czech team that doesn't have a ton of high-end skill, I thought he's looked good. And you look at Adam Yeko yesterday scoring that game-winning goal, and he's got quite the shot, and we saw what happens there when you give him an opportunity to do that.
Now, you look back a couple of years ago, the Blues had 3 first-round picks. It looked like they exclusively scouted the Sweden players.
That was Team Sweden.
You have Otto Stenberg, you have Theo Lindstein. What have you seen from those two guys and what they've been able to do in the World Juniors?
I think both have almost been a little underwhelming, but in different ways. And I think for Lindstein, it's because he had such a good tournament last year. We were hoping for really big things, but it feels like his role is not as important this year. He hasn't played Axel Sandin Pellikka when those two guys were just dominant together last year, but I wouldn't call it a bad tournament. It's maybe not as good as we thought he would be. When it comes to Otto Stenberg, I'm really liking his two-way game. I really like the energy he has. He's really good away from the puck, which is important because in hockey you play most of the game without the puck anyways, and he's good at that. He's attacking guys. He's retrieving the passes, and so I'd say even though he's not going out there and setting scoring records or anything like that, I think that he still is getting points, but he's doing a lot of things away from the puck that I also like.
Hey, Steven, I know you're tight on time, so one last one for me. Overall, where this Blues pipeline is at, we're talking about a lot of these guys. Jimmy Snuggerud's in this conversation, Adam Juracek, who we didn't even bring up. Where does this Blues team stand in terms of their draft capital?
I think they're still in a pretty good spot here. You look at the prospect pool. They don't have a star goalie coming in the waiting like Colin Ellis. We just saw him at the Spengler Cup, which is a kind of a unique situation there. But they don't really need a goalie in the short term. So then you look at everything else, and I'd say they got some good forwards. They got some guys who can go out there and back check really hard, and they got some skill. Defense, I think, is again just pretty decent. Like, we're not talking top 10, maybe we're talking 12 to 15 here, but that's still a good spot to be in for your prospect pool.
And last one here, I know you're short on time, so you can do this quickly. With Jimmy Snuggerud and what he's been able to do this year, I know he's kind of away from the action that you're seeing right now at World Juniors. How do you view him profile-wise once he gets to the NHL level?
I think he's a middle six goal scorer. I think he's a guy that I've liked for a few years here. I think that you got a guy that just puts himself in the right spot at the right time, and that's the thing. You want guys who are in scoring positions all the time, and it feels like he is. So, yeah, I think if he's not a trade piece, I do think he'll be a guy that should have no problem stepping into the NHL in short order.
He's Stephen Ellis, prospect analyst for the Daily Faceoff. We sincerely appreciate his time today here on BK and Ferrario. Follow him on Twitter at @SEllisHockey. Stephen, we appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for making us smarter about the Blues prospects.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Stephen.
As Stephen Ellis, appreciate his time joining us here on BK and Ferrario. I feel like the big one there, Alex, is what he was saying about Dalibor Dvorsky. He said Bo Horvat is the type of player that he thinks he can be if everything goes the right way. If everything goes as anticipated with his development process, he could be somebody that is kind of similar to Bo Horvat at the NHL level. Would you hit the button today? The classic BK game of hit the button or press your luck and hope for something more.
Absolutely.
Are you accepting Bo Horvat as the end result?
Yeah, I mean, Bo Horvat has solidified himself as a perfect number 2 center. I mean, he's a guy who can score 30 goals, but more than likely it's about 25 every single season. He's going to give you 50 to 70 points is kind of where that range is. I hope the defense is a little bit better than what Bo Horvat was, but Bo Horvat to me was always a really great player. He just never was on a great team. He was in the middle of that Vancouver Canucks squad that was rebuilding, and then he went to the Islanders where he's at right now, and that's just a disastrous of a team. So you put a Bo Horvat on a competitive team, I think you've got a really good player. Horvat, by the way, 9th overall pick back in 2013, which right there, top 10 like Dvorsky.
And on average, 27 goals, 57 points per year.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm typically the guy that always hits the button just to be on the safe side. Absolutely. If he ends up becoming Bo Horvat, that's the perfect number 2 center for this team to be right behind Robert Thomas.
Because you got your 100-point player in Robert Thomas.
I mean, you're set then down the middle. Sorry to cut you off, BK. In your top 6, and then you got to kind of figure out that third-line center role. You're set there for the next 5 to 6 years then?
Well,
and that's like bare minimum?
And the kid that he just mentioned, this Adam Yeko, who plays on Team Czechia, is a 6'6" kid that they drafted in the third round this last year. Big dude, elite shot. Like you've got a lot of guys. Stenberg's another one. You got a lot of dudes who could be third-line centers. Kaskamaki in the minor leagues right now. You get a lot of those guys. What you don't have anybody in the system is a Dalibor Dvorsky, and that's why I would smash that button.
So I will say out of caution, I do think it's worth noting what the development looked like for Bo Horvat. Because if the Blues wants to immediately be a contender, well, Bo Horvat was not a number 2 center early on. Mm-hmm. Bo Horvat was a third-line center early on in his NHL career. He was a goal scorer, but otherwise there were a lot of questions about, like, defensively what it looked like. And then, I mean, he was a 15 to 20 goal scorer for the first 4 years of his NHL career, and then it clicked when he was 23 years old, year 5. The reason why I bring that up is because I think sometimes we want things to happen immediately, right? Like, we want it to be ready now. Okay, Dvorsky's going to be a number 2 center, which means right now he needs to be a number 2 center. The likelihood is he's probably a third-line center for the next few years, and he will develop into being a little bit more than that. And over the next few years, you'll have a really nice 1-2 combo with Thomas and Dvorsky. Mm-hmm. It may take some time to get there, and that's the thing. The snug route is the same thing to me, where it's like, okay, maybe he becomes a 30-goal scorer. Likely, it takes a little bit of time for him to get there. Snuggerud is further on in his development than Dvorsky, just because he's gone the college route. But I do think that is worth noting. I would also hit the button. I would take this in a heartbeat. That's a great outcome for Dalibor Dvorsky. But it is worth noting. It took a little bit of time to get there.
Well, and on top of that cautionary tale, he was also the opposite of what the Blues are doing with Dvorsky. Bo Horvat was drafted, and then the next year it was, we need you at the NHL level. I think he played 5 games in the AHL. Wasn't that good in the AHL, and they said, well, we need you because we're a bad team. Made the playoffs the first year, and then from there he missed the playoffs 4 straight seasons, made it, and then missed the playoffs for 3 straight seasons. Like, they were a rebuilding team that said, we need help now, and they did 0 development in the minors. They rushed you to the NHL. So the good news, if like the positive side of this thing, is the Blues are doing the opposite of this. They hope that he can develop at the AHL level so that when he gets to the NHL level, you've already kind of jump-started that development process.
Just look at it as the age. Like, he was 19 years old when he got to the NHL level, and that's what Dvorsky is right now. Dvorsky will likely also reach the NHL as a 19-year-old.
It says something to figure out the pro style at the AHL versus going right to the NHL and trying to figure it out.
He played 70 games that first year at the NHL level. Dvorsky did, and he was playing about Bo Horvat did, and he was playing 12 to 13 minutes a night on average. So he was a lower-level player getting a little bit of time, getting his feet wet at the NHL. And then the next season he came back and was a minus 30, scored 16 goals that year, and was playing 17 minutes a night. I don't think he's going to get his teeth kicked in, talking about Dvorsky, the way that Horvat did when he came up to the NHL level because of this experience that he's had at the AHL. But I do think it could take some time before he becomes that fully formed 30-plus goal, 60 to 70-point player. And that's just something to keep in mind, is it may not be, hey, you've got a number 2 center ready to go immediately. Snuggerud might not be a top-line winger immediately. It might take some time before we can get to either of those 2 things. All right, if you missed any of our conversation that we just had, thought that was really informative, talking to Stephen Ellis, prospect analyst for the Daily Faceoff. You can check that out on the podcast page. It's all brought to you by
Schaefer Door Company.
You can check that out on the 101 ESPN app, which is presented by the Dobbs Tire and Auto Center Company. You can also check it out.
Don't do that again, man. Do that another segment.
2. The 101 ESPN app is also presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Center. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
The Blues play on ESPN.
Shoots, he scores!
Tonight, Blues and Senators. Pregame at 6, puck drop at 7.
The wait is over!
The quest for the Stanley Cup happens here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. We've got Bradford Bruns back in the studio for us today. Be safe out there this weekend. It sounds like it's going to get pretty nasty. Have some kind of a plan on what you're planning to do for work on Monday.
I appreciate
me and Alex,
that, man.
I think we're going to do it from home.
Yeah, I'm not going to leave my house until Tuesday.
Oh. Well,
Yeah.
I see how it is.
Yeah.
I see.
Hey, somebody's got to be there.
Yeah, somebody's got to be the workhorse.
Fortunately, I'm the one who draws the short straw.
Look, man, you were off for 2 weeks. You can handle a little snow.
No, I can't.
I will be broadcasting from the stairwell under my house.
Yeah, your Harry Potter.
Yeah, my Harry Potter
closet.
dungeon.
That'll be great.
Yeah, that's where we'll pre- and post game on Saturday, and BK and Ferrari on Monday.
I'll
will
be
coming
broadcasting from home as well. I will be in my studio, which is right next to Luca's room, so I'm sure that you will be able to hear Luca on the show on Monday.
Right.
I apologize in advance. All right, T-Bone, what do you have for us today in the junk drawer, my friend?
All right, guys, I saw a list, and I'm curious if you can guess or how many of these shows you have seen, but the 10 most pirated TV shows in 2024.
Just to clarify, are these like new shows that came out in 2024, or are we talking about like...
New shows / new season.
Okay, sure. I was just making sure we're not talking about like, hey, people really wanted to see The Sopranos 25 years later.
Makes sense to pirate that.
Yeah, exactly.
As
so I
far
wasn't
as
sure
I can
kinda
tell,
what we were
all
talking about
these
here.
are new / new season.
Okay,
There's only one I don't recognize.
One of them has to be the Penguin.
The Penguin was number 5 on the list.
Everybody talking about it. That's going to be one that people pirate
By the way,
immediately to try and get.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard good things. That's one that's on my list.
I need to watch. Does it have anything to do with the Gotham series? Like, is the Penguin
No,
tied into
not-
Gotham?
not
okay,
that
because
series.
we watched Gotham and then we
Different-
stopped, and I'd have to catch up
different
with
era
that one.
of the DCU.
That makes
There's
sense.
been a lot of them.
All right, so big shows from this past calendar year. Man, it was not a very good year for television, in my opinion.
Man, this list, I've seen 7 of the 10, and I would say all of them very good. So I think you're underselling the
Shrinking.
Shrinking was not in the
I
top
don't watch
10.
a lot of TV. Like, that's the problem. Like, a lot of these series, I watch stuff that's from like 3 years ago so I can binge through
Are
it.
there any documentaries on this list? As far as you're aware.
No.
Okay.
No.
Damn, TV
Like
shows.
when I
from
say
this
these,
past
you'll know. Like if I said some of these, you would know them.
Are they like sitcoms or are they like dramas?
Like I'll give you something that I don't think you would get. So like number 10, Halo, which was on like Paramount Plus. So
I didn't realize that came out this year. I thought this was like 2 years
so
ago.
Halo is probably a new season. It's probably what it was.
That makes sense.
Halo. The other one that I don't know if you guys would get, Arcane, I think is like a anime. So
No.
that's the other one I didn't think you would get. But that was 10 and number 4.
Number 4 was
Jeez.
Arcane?
Yeah, number 4 was Arcane, 10 was Halo.
If anime is 4, I ain't getting these.
And I think BK seen a minimum
There were new
2 or
episodes
3
of
on this
There were new
list.
episodes of Pokemon, wasn't there? Maybe people are
Yellowstone?
No,
That's
not
one that a lot of people
Yellowstone.
watch.
You might have to just tell us on these.
House of Dragons?
House of Dragon was number 1.
Oh. There's new episodes of that? I thought that series was over.
I think that's
No,
a new one
new
this
season.
year.
New season was
What about
this year.
the show you were just talking about, Dune?
Dune Prophecy was number 9 on
go.
this list. Season finale.
I'm trying to think of TV shows that like have recently
Squid
new
Games?
episodes.
That just
Squid
came out, so I don't
Game's
think
not out there.
it doesn't qualify.
2 of these were on, 3 of these were on Amazon. That helps you give it a hint.
Amazon.
The other
Abbott Elementary?
No.
Is there
One-
any Jack Reacher out?
Reacher was number 7. His
makes sense.
latest season came out
What's
early
the what's
2024.
what's the movie or the show with Stallone? Oh my
Nope.
God,
I
it's
know
not
what you're
that
talking
one.
about, but it's not that.
Tulsa King. Thank you, Bradford.
Yeah,
It's
not
not
that.
Tulsa King.
Not on there.
That one actually is a good
give
show.
us 2 and 3.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm
number
drawing a blank.
2, The Boys. Our
Oh,
newest
okay.
season.
Yeah,
That
I
makes
have not
sense.
seen that yet.
Number 3, I need to watch it. I have it. Shogun. It is number 3. It's very
that another
critically
Western?
acclaimed.
I've heard great things about that. I've not watched it yet, but I've heard excellent things about
Is that like Yellowstone?
No, that's
No.
samurai kind of show on FX. So I almost give you the hint like Hulu, but I think that's where it's at.
Sure.
So that's 3. We mentioned Arcane is 4. I've never heard of that one. Penguin was 5.
Reacher 6.
Reacher 7.
Oh.
Fallout was 6.
Fallout's
on Amazon.
My
Very
buddy's
good based on the video game.
Yeah, my buddy's a big Fallout video game, and he said he loved it.
The show was very good.
I wasn't big into the video game.
7 Reacher, 8 was Silo. That's the other one that I knew you had seen. 9 Dune Prophecy, 10 Halo. Those are the
I got
10
more than I thought we would have gotten.
pirated TV shows.
We're up to date on Silo.
Not happy with the second season.
It's okay. I thought season 1 was pretty good, and it kind of hooked me, and I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and give this another chance. Let's see where we're going with this thing. And the way that it ended, I'm not giving anything away, I promise, but like the way that it ended, it opened up opportunities for it to really explore some like interesting paths. I know it's based on a book. I could just read the books and find out if I'm interested in it or not. I'm just going to go ahead and watch the shows instead.
Smart.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll keep watching just till the end of the season 2, and then
you just referenced my high school career when it comes to literature.
Sure, yeah.
The Great Gatsby, wonderful book. Now I'll just watch the movie and feel like it's good enough.
That's how I've gone
I like
about
Great
my
Gatsby.
life.
I do too.
Unpopular opinion.
I do too. Great Gatsby was outstanding. Great Expectations, terrible.
Catcher in the Rye, all those books.
It's a Tale of Two Cities, trash.
I don't know if I read that.
Romeo and Juliet, trash. Anything Shakespeare, trash.
Any book, trash. Movies
Okay.
are better.
Okay, well, let's
Movies
not
are
go
all
there.
better
Cut
than
the mic.
books.
Cut the mic.
Get educated, sir.
I stand by what I said.
You're ridiculous.
Any book trash.
I did want to bring this up. Speaking of pirated / streamed.
Uh-oh.
According to a new report, Americans spent 23% less time on streaming services in 2024. So it's Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Prime Video, Max. Do you find yourself watching less through streaming than you have in the past?
Yeah, and you know why? Because
why?
of the advertising. Like, so Disney Plus is a great example for my family. Like, we have it, but they've upped the prices. And what I was paying for just normal Disney Plus now is ads, and it's $15 more a month to get no ads. And so now, I mean, like, we'll watch it occasionally, but now it's just like I don't want to sit here and watch 3 minutes of commercials when my girls are trying to watch, like, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse or something. So, I mean, we still watch it occasionally, but we have a service that we watch, like, movies and TV shows through that don't have the ads. So that's what we spend more time on.
We have become a YouTube family, so I don't know if that's considered a streaming service in this or not, but if it's not, that would be one of the reasons why we...
Like YouTube TV or just watch stuff on YouTube?
Have YouTube videos that play while we're doing stuff.
We've become big into just, like, playing music. So, like, we've got, like, a speaker that connects to our television and it's Bluetooth.
Sure.
We're big on, like, rather than turning, like, a movie on, I just turn music on the Bluetooth speaker and then they dance and listen and things like that. YouTube's dangerous, though, because my daughters keep finding, like, random weird, like, sensory stuff on YouTube, and it's like, what are you watching?
Yeah, I don't fall into this category. Like, I feel like my streaming watching has been the same because, as I just mentioned, I saw 7 of these 10 shows that were the most pirated in 2024.
I've seen 0 of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
You need to get cultured.
I don't watch TV, which is weird.
I
I
have
watched
to watch something.
Silo, and then I have seen all of the seasons of The Boys up until this one. And then Penguin is on my list, and Dune Prophecy is on my list. So 4 of them I'm at least interested in, and Shogun is on my list as well.
I watch shows that are like 2 or 3 years in so that I can, like, Blacklist is a great example. Like, when I started watching Blacklist when they were filming the final season so that I could binge through it rather than have to wait.
That's how my wife is.
It's
My wife is
awful.
like, if this season is not all the way out yet, I will not start it because I need to see all of it. Severance is a show that's coming out soon that she's going to try to do that to me, and I'm going to say, no, I'm going to watch this week to week. I actually enjoy, I think I prefer the classic experience of having to wait a week for the next episode.
That's just ridiculous.
No,
but
I think I prefer it.
Because I'm trying to think of what the show is that Katie and I just started watching. It's on HBO Max, but it was 2 seasons in, and we started watching it because somebody recommended it to us. I'm going to look it up. We watched it, we binged it, and it was incredible. And now we have to wait a whole year for the next season. And it's like, I can't do this. This is awful. What? Oh, From. It's like a horror series. It's on HBO Max. We watched the first 2 seasons, and now we got to wait a year to watch the next one, and it pisses me off.
See, I like that. Gets you a little surprised.
No, I hate
I'm always
it.
surprised. Oh, there's a new season? It's like almost a gift on Christmas.
The tough part is when you find a season like Alex was talking about, or find a series that's already a couple of seasons in, and you don't realize there's not a third one.
Oh, yeah,
and so then you have to wait for the third series. season, that's when it gets a little.
Or it's the one show on Netflix about the serial killers, mine hunters,
Sure,
that
yeah,
you
and then they
find
just
out
stop.
after you binge it that they just stopped. I'm like, what the hell?
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. They stopped it at a terrible spot. Too, 'cause
Totally.
you were just about to explore like the most interesting path they can go down. Oh, it's just brutal. Absolutely
me
brutal.
off.
All right, coming up next, T-Bone is all in on the Illini, and Mizzou's about to go through an absolute gauntlet in their conference slate. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Jamie Rivers here, and this is my latest jersey giveaway of the season. It is a signed Jordan Binnington Winter Classic jersey, the OG, the original from the very first one at Busch Stadium. It is awesome. We all love that baby blue, and you look great wearing it too. Get entered to win that autographed Binner jersey right now at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Winner must be 21 or older. Jersey giveaway is refreshed by Bud Light. Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy.
WXOS, WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. BK and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In about 10 minutes, we're going to be joined by Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. But T-Bone, your Illini were back in action last night. They went on the road against a top 10 opponent. And all week you were saying, oof. Tough one coming up for the Illini. They got to go on the road at Oregon. Oregon is really good. I don't know how this one's going to go. And not only did they go out there and win, they kicked their ass. 35 points on the road as the win. It's the most lopsided road victory against a top 10 opponent in Illini program history.
Oh, yeah.
T-Bone was tweeting out a bunch of stuff last night about how confident he is in this team. He went from not knowing exactly what to expect from the Illini to January 2nd, Alex, saying this team has championship aspirations now. And we're not just talking about the Big Ten. We're talking about a national title. All right, T-Bone, talk your stuff. Why are you so in on this Illini team right now?
The reason it sold me last night was not let alone just it was a road game against a top 10 team in Oregon. And I was worried about it because this is a very young team. They are the Illini are the youngest team in the Big Ten this season. But you have your two best players, and I'll call them that because I think there's debate on Will Riley if he is their second best guy or not. I call him that because Will Riley and Yakichonis are the two guys that are getting the NBA hype to be lottery picks. Well, Yakichonis spends a decent chunk of that first half and then early portions of the second half on the bench because he's in foul trouble. So right away I'm thinking, okay, Oregon's going to be able to take advantage of this. Will Riley only had 5 points in last night's win. All 5 came in the final minute and a half of that game during garbage time in that blowout win. And Yakachonis ended up going for 16 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. But the fact that he was on the bench for a big chunk of that first half, and they still put the pressure on. They went into halftime up by 7, came out early in the second half, and then really put that game away. That right there showed me, man, this team is extremely deep. They are deep basically 1 through, I would go 9, and at times they've got a 10th man that can kind of slot in and play a couple minutes for them. But 1 through 9, they are a very deep team. Gibbs Lawhorn was fantastic last night with his 11 points off the bench. This team is still learning on the defensive end of the floor a little bit, but, man, they can shoot the three-point shot with the best of them, man. They are one of the best three-point shooting teams, in my opinion. They look for that shot. They're explosive off of the dribble. They are well-balanced offensively. I think they are truly a championship aspiration team. I think this is the best team Brad Underwood's had. And I said that last year, about last year's squad that ran into that buzzsaw at UConn. This team is deeper. It's got better pure talent. The only thing that makes me worried about them when they get to the tournament is the fact that they are so young. And
so that's what I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to ask you about this because you texted us something yesterday that was on the Illini broadcast during that game where they said a championship team has not had a freshman leading scorer in a decade. That is likely the path for Illinois. Yakachonis?
Yeah.
That's how I pronounce it. Casper. We're going with Casper again.
Caspy.
He's likely to be he is a true freshman for the Illini. He's unbelievable. That guy's amazing. He's one of my favorite players to watch in college basketball right now. Does that make you nervous that you get into the postseason, you get into the tournament, and you are relying on a true freshman to be the guy for a potential championship caliber roster when nobody's been able to do that in a decade?
A little bit, but last night was the game that made me feel more confident in the fact that they could do it because he wasn't the guy. You know, he did finish with 16 points, which was was third on the team in scoring in that game. But as I mentioned, he didn't really factor into the first half because he was in foul trouble, and they were able to survive that against an Oregon team on the road in what was just their second road game of the season. I think because they have so much depth and they can be explosive off of the dribble and not just have to rely on him to run the point, I think they can survive with a freshman leading scorer if he does go through those struggles. But, man, watching Yakachonis play, I don't think there's any stage that's going to be too big for him, man. There's a reason he's going to be a draft lottery pick. I think it's going to be fine for him. I'm not too worried about them. I think there's going to be moments where this team does have lapses because they are so young. But by the time we get to March, I think they'll clean that up. Not worried about their youth, and I'm not worried about Yakachonis. I think that guy's a stud.
What I find interesting about this Illini team is how different they are compared to what it was early in the Brad Underwood tenure. What I mean by that is defensively, they're excellent. This is a real defensive team. And they're doing it in such a different way. Early on, it was forced turnover. It was a lot of what Mizzou does defensively, where Mizzou is all about, okay, force a turnover, get out in transition, let's run. That's how they kind of got their offense going. Illinois was that, and that's what his motto was also at Stephen F. Austin at Oklahoma State as well. It was pressure, fast, up-tempo team. And then about midway through his tenure at Illinois, things changed, and he kind of changed his defensive style. And last year we saw that to an even greater degree, but they weren't as good defensively last year. This year, they're just shutting teams down.
Yeah.
Like they have these defensive possessions where it's not about forcing turnovers. They keep you out of the paint. They do not allow any of those easy shots on the interior. They're forcing these lower percentage three-point shots, and then boom, you're having to go the other direction off of a miss. Like, it's still getting out and running. They're still a very good transition team. It's just coming about it in such different ways. They have one of the lowest turnover rates in all of college basketball right now. So it's interesting to see the development, the evolution of how Brad Underwood's style teams play.
And what interests me is not just defensively, but when you look at what he's done offensively, think about the teams that Underwood's had, right? Early on in his tenure, it was more of we're just going to try and play through Kofi Coburn. We're going to be this big physical team, plays kind of that post offense. Then he transitions into the Terrence Shannon era, which is, okay, now we're going to be ball screens, slashers, Domask was more of a, okay, he's got to back guys down. We're going to play kind of ISO basketball with him and Shannon.
Drive and kick.
Yeah, that was their style last year. And then this year it is like the 7-second offense that Mike D'Antoni made so great. Yep. They still run a ton of ball screens, but it is essentially, all right, are we going to get the layup off the ball screen? If not, we're going to kick and pop, or we're going to drive and kick the ball out to the three-point shot. And they've got guys, I mean, Isevich, their big man. Mm-hmm. He reminds me a little of what Sabonis is at the NBA level. I don't think he's going to be NBA ready this year. I think he will be an NBA player by the time his time is up with the fight in Illini.
All right, so that's the Illini side of things. They played a really competitive game against Mizzou a couple of weeks ago, a game that came down to the wire. Illinois, by the way, right now in KenPom, which is just basically a power ranking of who the best teams are in the country. Number 8 right now in the country. So
5 in net ranking after last night's win.
Yeah, they're a very good team. And Mizzou is now 55 in the KenPom rankings. That's problematic because in their conference, here are the rankings on KenPom from the top teams in the SEC. You guys ready for this? It's going to take me a second.
This is going to hurt.
1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21, 22, 33, 36, 37. Those are teams in the SEC. If you look at the most difficult strength of schedules remaining in all of college basketball, Alex, 1 to 16 is just the SEC teams listed in order, 1 to 16, depending on who your teams are that you have to play twice in that. Missouri, thankfully, is 15th on the list, so they have the 15th toughest schedule in the country remaining the rest of the season, now that we're into the conference slate, which is behind 14 teams in the SEC. The gauntlet that they are about to go on is insane. KenPom has them projected to go 7-11. I don't think that's going to be good enough to get you into the NCAA tournament. You probably have to go 9-9 to guarantee yourself a spot. If you go 500 in the SEC, I think you get into the NCAA tournament. If you go 8-10, you probably need to win a game or 2 in the SEC tournament to be able to get yourself in. It's gonna be tough. Missouri could legitimately be a top 50 team in the country and miss out because they might end up being like 13th in the SEC with that kind of a schedule. So Illini in a really good spot, both in terms of where they're at nationally and in their respective conference. The SEC is as good of a conference as I can remember us seeing. I didn't think that was going to be the case, but that's where we're at. The conference has really invested heavily in basketball in recent seasons. We're seeing that pay off in a huge way. Mizzou kicks things off in the SEC with the most difficult matchup that you could possibly have, which is Auburn.
Oh, good.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
You can now listen to 101 ESPN on demand. Get caught up on all our shows and podcasts at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 mobile app. 101 ESPN podcasts are presented by the Schaefer Door Company. ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. And every month during the season, you can register to win tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Enter to score free Blues tickets now at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 app. Brought to you by Ted Cruz, serving original frozen custard since 1929. Broadcasting live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us here on the show ahead of the Blues back-to-back games over the next couple of days. You'll be able to hear both of those right here on 101 ESPN. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
BK, Happy New Year. I'm doing fine. How are you guys?
Doing very well. Blues back-to-back over the next couple of days. Just had that huge victory in the Winter Classic on Tuesday night. I feel like the biggest storyline right now, Curbs, for the Blues is what they decide to do in net. They're going to play one tonight, one tomorrow, and then we'll see what happens from there. What's your read on the situation right now? How do you think they try to split this thing up going into the second half of the season?
You know, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the year. I think that they wanted to manage Jordan's workload at the beginning of the year a little bit better. And then with the season going the way it did, I think the demand increased on your number one goaltender. Guys, I don't sense in any way, in talking to David Alexander, the team, I don't sense there's any kind of a goalie blip issue whatsoever. And I think it's important to say that. I think when you look at I expect Bennington in net tonight. I expect Hofer in net tomorrow in Columbus, and I expect Jordan in goal against Minnesota, and you go from there. I think right now, if they have two goaltenders that are playing well, if they are playing well, you look at Jim Montgomery's track record, and you've got a guy that was very comfortable playing Swayman and Omar, every other day over a 2-year span. So I look at that scenario and, think that if he's very comfortable with goaltenders, he has no problem doing that. But to me, I easily see it settling much more into a 2 for Jordan, 1 for Hofer, rotate them 1 and 1, depending on how that schedule goes. I still think Jordan Bennington is going to get the bulk of the load, obviously. And look, I know the records look a little bit different. Now, Jordan's played 15 more games than Hofer has, right? But when you're looking at the goals against average, pretty close to similar, save percentage, pretty close to similar, sometimes you got to look at the different competition they played in there. And I think Jordan showed exactly in the Winter Classic why he's Jordan Bennington and for the Blues. So I look for a better balance than the first half, but I also think that how that playoff race is going to go could dictate that.
Curb, speaking of that playoff race, you got 13 games in the month of January. Only 3 of those played against the Eastern Conference. What do you take away when you look at the 5 teams right now in the West that are battling for one of those wild card spots? Vancouver, Calgary, Utah, St. Louis, Seattle, all who have played 500 hockey over the last 10.
Well, you know what you start to realize is, and you have to be somewhat kind of careful in there, but when you look at where the St. Louis Blues were when Jim Montgomery took over, and when this type of thing happens, you have to almost split your season up into 2. You can't forget the first, part of the season when the Blues were 9-12-1. That is part of it, but it's almost like starting a new year off. The Blues were 5 points out of the second wild card, and they were 13th in the West when Jim Montgomery took over. You go to where they are today, and they're 4 points out of the second wild card, and they're 11th in the West. And you're sitting there going, okay, they gained 1 spot on the wild card. Well, they did that while playing 4 games over 500. Okay? So it shows you just how well you've got to play. The way I look at it right now is I think the Blues are not playing the juggernauts of the other divisions in this stretch of hockey for the most part. I think there's 2 games in there where they're playing a top 2 team. To me, you got to find ways to just bank points and win them. And no excuse, like eventually then, if you're still going to get back into it, you're going to have to beat those top teams as well, because that's what you put yourself in with a 9-12-2 start. So to me, Alex, it's tough competition. The one thing we know for the St. Louis Blues is when it comes to looking at the opposition, they proved it against the Buffalo Sabres. They can't overlook anybody. You got to treat everybody like they're tough, and I think if they play the style of play that they played in Chicago, they'll end up being pretty good.
Chris Kerber's the voice of the Blues. He's joining us here on 101 ESPN. He typically joins us on Wednesday with the New Year holiday. We decided to move this thing over to Friday this week. Kerbs, it kind of snuck up on me with how well Robert Thomas has been playing in the month of December. Finished the month with 14 games played, 6 goals, 19 points, a plus 13 while he was on the ice, and he was playing about 21 minutes per night. Just going to ask you, because you've seen basically every game that Robert Thomas has played as a St. Louis Blue. Was that the best month that we've seen of Robert Thomas's career, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think statistically, you have to look at it. I don't know. I mean, last year he had some pretty high numbers, and I don't know how the month itself played out. But considering the fact to me, Brandon, that he came off that injury, the Blues were transitioning with a new coach. What that coach has asked of these players, I think you have to look at it as one of the best months that he's played. He clearly has helped offensively lead the Blues back into the battle, when that offense even sputtered a little bit. And those numbers, if this power play gets going, are going to rise even more. So I think you have to be really happy with what you're seeing from him. And, look, there's still motivation for him from a Four Nations standpoint. If there's injuries along the way here in this next month for Team Canada, Robert Thomas could easily get a phone call. So I think there's a lot to play for than just the St. Louis Blues. And guys, I know some fans may listen to this and go, well, it's an in-season tournament. It's a chance for these guys from Canada, the United States, Finland, and Sweden to represent their countries. And I'm telling you something, when I talk to every one of them, it means a ton. So I have to think that is also part of his motivation right now.
And Kerbs, I know maybe this one isn't necessarily to the same degree as the Olympics, but we were talking about this earlier as it pertains to Jordan Binnington. For some of these guys, it can kind of bolster a Hall of Fame case. If Binnington ends up helping them win a gold in the Four Nations face-off and then potentially starts for them in the Olympics and has a cup under his belt as well, that's the start of a potential Hall of Fame career. So I don't know if that's something that they're thinking about, but for their legacies, it also is pretty significant.
Yeah, I don't know that the players are thinking about it, but you're absolutely right in the sense that representing your country, bolsters that ability. You win gold in World Juniors. You do what Jay Bouwmeester did, win gold at every level, and then win a Stanley Cup. And only 20-something people have done that or something like that. That's absolutely part of the legacy of their career. It's something kind of unique with hockey. Keep in mind, again, you're talking they call it the Hockey Hall of Fame for a reason. It's not the NHL Hall of Fame. So accomplishments outside of the NHL also play a role in candidacies for that. Now, obviously, with the players we're looking at with the St. Louis Blues, way early to put that in there. But without a shred of doubt, look, more to your point, we have seen not winning a Stanley Cup or winning championships or major awards be a reason why players have not gone into the Hall of Fame. Curtis Joseph being the front runner of that case for me that should be in there. So if those are reasons to maybe hold somebody out, I got to think they sure as hell are reasons to put somebody in.
Kerbs, final one for me. We talked about Robert Thomas's play, and really when you look at the top players, Buchnevich has been a point-per-game player since Montgomery took over. Jordan Kyrou has been as well. When you look at this next stretch of hockey, how crucial are guys like Jake Neighbors, Zach Bolduc, and Brandon Saad going to be?
Well, look, as you get into the second half of the season, and these games and awareness and attention to details tighten up because all of a sudden what felt like a long time back, a playoff, all of a sudden you're realizing, oh man, we're starting to get limited number of opportunities here. You have to have balance. You have to have some scoring. Brandon Saad has goals in 2 games this year. They're going to need them. They're just going to need them. Jake Neighbors, I think Jake's just kind of continuing to play along and be just fine. I think if Zach Bolduc were to catch some fire in there as well, I think there's more goals to come from Braden Shen in that mix there. And I think there's another level to Pavel Buchnevich and some cleaner hockey from him. To your point, Alex, you're going to need all these guys. You're just going to need a balanced attack because, yes, you will have the 2-week break for the Four Nations Cup, but you will be playing a lot of everyday hockey after that. And for the St. Louis Blues, if they are going to become a real contender for the playoffs, they're knocking on the door of that right now. But if you're going to step into, we're going to be a threat for the playoffs, they've got to string some wins together. It starts in something like tonight. You know, the Ottawa Senators, this is a team that went on a 9-4-0 streak. It included a 6-game win streak, right? They're sitting 3 games over 500. The Blues are 1. The last time the Blues were 2 games over 500 was 8 games in when they were 5-3. I mean, at some point, like, the moral victories here, guys, are gone. You got to beat some of these teams and put a streak together, and that's the only reality that's going to get you to the playoffs.
And that streak you just talked about with what the Senators were able to do, that's the exact kind of thing that the Blues are trying to do right now. Hey, Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. We'll be listening tonight. Alex's pregame coverage starting at 6. Kerbs has the puck drop for you at 7 o'clock. And then tomorrow, back-to-back, Blues versus the Columbus Blue Jackets. You'll hear that right here in your home of the Blues as well. Appreciate the time as always, Kerb. We'll talk to you again next week.
Okay, guys, have an awesome week. Talk to you later.
Absolutely. See, That's Chris Kerber joining us as he does each and every week here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate his time as always. In 15 minutes, we'll put a bow on this thing with the BK and Ferrario Rewind, but coming up next, it's our NFL weekend look ahead. Good luck to find 3 games that you care about this weekend. We'll try to break down some of the biggest ones that still have playoff implications for you next year on 101 ESPN.
You can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
This is Tyler Tucker, and it's game day on your home, the Blues 101 ESPN.
Blues Game Day is presented by Buffalo Wild Wings, the ultimate arena for wings and wins. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Sins swing into STL. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns with the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight at 7 o'clock, 5th place St. Louis will host Ottawa on 101 ESPN. Jim Montgomery's Blues have captured 3 of their past 4 games, including Tuesday's Winter Classic over Chicago. The Senators also hot with 7 victories since December 11th. College hoops. Illinois secures its 10th win, steamrolling Oregon 109-77. Tomorrow, Mizzou opens SEC play versus number 2 Auburn. Weekend Pigskin, our NFL triple header features Packers, Bears, Broncos, Chiefs, plus Lions, Vikings. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
All right, let's get into our NFL weekend look ahead. We're going to do this a little differently than normal because
we're not looking ahead to any of these games.
Gonna be honest with you guys, don't have a whole lot of interest in that Chiefs versus Broncos game.
Why, man?
Doesn't do a whole lot.
Pretty crucial for the Cincinnati Bengals to get in.
Broncos all out against the Chiefs, like second and third stringers. I'm good. I'm good without previewing what that's gonna look like for us.
This is a Super Bowl champ.
There are some compelling matchups, or at least some important games that we're gonna see going into the weekend. I picked the Ravens minus the 20 points against the Cleveland Browns on Saturday afternoon. That's your 3:30 game tomorrow. There's basically no intrigue there other than to see, how do the Ravens look in their tune-up game heading into the postseason. The big game, though, tomorrow, Bengals at the Steelers. I've got the Bengals in this one. I do think that they will win it. Joe Burrow is playing at an MVP caliber level right now. I think the Steelers are kind of sputtering. I think we're seeing, okay, yeah, they have a very good defense, but it's not quite as good as maybe we expected it to be this season. And the offense, while better under Russell Wilson, still has some issues. What are you guys anticipating out of this one? Bengals at Steelers Saturday night. Huge game for both teams.
I think the Bengals are going to blow them out of the water. And I think the Steelers, it's going to put a lot of doubt into people's minds about the Steelers because they have just been playing poorly for these last 5 games. I think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to have a statement game here. And the problem with that is that statement is not going to matter. You're right. The Miami Dolphins are going to struggle, and Cincinnati's going to be like, holy bleep, we've got this thing. And then the Broncos.
Dolphins are expected to start Tyler Huntley this weekend as well. It sounds like Tua will not be able to go.
So then this is just going to be you're waiting for the Broncos. And unfortunately for the Bengals, the Broncos are just going to wipe the floor against the Chiefs secondary pieces. But I'm expecting this to be like a 2 or 3 touchdown win for Cincinnati.
Wow.
Yeah, see, I think Pittsburgh wins. I think they end the hope for Cincinnati before they get to that spot. Because, look, I understand that offense has been scuffling. I agree that offense isn't great. I've been screaming from the mountaintops all season long that the Steelers are frauds. Bet against them when they get to the playoffs because they're one and done. Sorry, Kerry. They scored 44 at Cincinnati earlier this year. That Bengals defense is terrible. So I'm not expecting the Bengals to be able to shut down the Steelers. I think the Steelers offense is going to get right. If we were doing the classic what's the overreaction game on going into Monday, it would be this one. Because I think a lot of people will see the Steelers put up points and go, they're fixed. Russ is back to cooking. They're going to be fine when they get to the playoffs. No, it's not going to matter. Bengals defense is trash. Pittsburgh's going to end their playoff hopes. They won't even have to watch the Broncos game because Cincinnati's going home.
Burrow 3-3 in his career against the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you look more recently, though, he has had a decent amount of success against them, put up over the last few years. 41-20. They lost that game. 37-38 in those games. So he's found a way to be able to have success against the Steelers defense. It really just comes down to, do you trust the Bengals to get a couple of stops? And if you think that they will, probably going to win this game. If you don't, which didn't happen last time when they lost big in that, or they gave up a ton of points. It was like 41-38 or something like that. If you don't think they're going to be able to get the stops, you're going to probably take the Pittsburgh Steelers side of things. I get both sides. I trust Joe Burrow, so I'll go ahead and take that side of things. They're going to be all out in this game. All right, on Sunday, there are very few games that truly matter. There are a couple, though, as it pertains to seeding in the postseason. Chargers versus Raiders I find to be a little interesting, mostly from a strategic standpoint. So the LA Chargers going into this one are still up to potentially move up a bit. But that may change on Saturday, and that's where things get interesting to me. So if the Ravens win, they effectively end the Steelers' campaign to move up to the 3 seed, which could change the Steelers' motivation in that game that we were just talking about. But the Steelers could still drop down below the LA Chargers. So that's where things get interesting. If the Steelers lose against the Bengals, as I think they will, the Chargers could move up to the 5 seed, which I think has real meaning. Because in the postseason, if you're the Chargers, what would you rather do? Go to Baltimore or go to Houston, a team that feels like it's dead on arrival once you get to the postseason? I would much rather see Houston on the road. I think the Chargers would win that game, in fact. So I believe the Chargers should be going all out in this one. Again, that is determined by what happens in that Steelers game. If that is the case, you guys think they end up winning and covering that 4-point spread on the road at Las Vegas?
I was going to pick the Chargers as one of my plays for our pick'em, but because of what you mentioned with the Steelers, I was worried because I don't want to make it a 2-point play. The Steelers win, and then the Chargers say, okay, well, there's nothing for us to worry about, so let's put the backup in.
I would love to pick that on Sunday if I had the opportunity to do so, but we can't do that right now.
But I do think the Steelers are going to lose, like I said, and I think the Chargers are going to go all out because, you want the favorable matchup against Houston. You want to get to the second round to where the other team is probably getting banged up as well, and now you've got a favorable opportunity. I'm going to do everything in my power as an NFL team to take on the Houston Texans, and you take on the wounded dog early if you can, and that's what the Chargers need to do.
Yeah, I like them minus the 4 points, whether they end up playing their guys because of what you're talking about or they don't. I mean, the Raiders team's a bad football team, but if I'm the Chargers, I agree. I think you want to push for that number 4 seed because we've seen this a lot where you end up with that 4 seed in the playoffs, and they're just kind of the one that's gifted the 4 seed because they won their division. Looking at you, NFC South, for the last 3 years. So, if you're a team and you've got a shot at that 5 seed, to me, you go all out for it because you've got an opportunity to win that. Now, that does mean you probably are getting a date with the number 1 seed, but I don't know how you guys feel. This feels like an open playoff field. You may not end up with the 1 seed in the second round because there's a chance the 6 might be able to take down the 3 in either conference, the way that things are starting to shape out. So if that's the case, not only do I go against the weaker duck in the first round, I also may be avoiding that number 1 team if that certain scenario plays out.
All right, so we talked a lot about what we're going to be able to get in the AFC side of things. If things play out, in my opinion, in the ideal scenario, we will have in the first round of the playoffs, Bills against the Bengals. That would be your 2-7. Baltimore against Pittsburgh. That would be your 3-6. And then Houston against the Chargers. That is not necessarily the most likely outcome. That is what I think would prove to be the best first round of the playoff possible, though. What is more likely, in my opinion, is Buffalo going up against the Denver Broncos. I think that would be ideal if you're Buffalo going up against Denver instead of going up against Cincinnati. Baltimore as the 3 seed, most likely, in my opinion, against Pittsburgh, potentially the 6 seed there, although it could be the Chargers as well. They would rather play the Steelers than the Chargers. And then Houston against one of Pittsburgh or LA. How do you guys feel about that first portion of the playoff bracket? Is there a lot of intrigue for you in the AFC side of things?
Man, it's wild how the intrigue was on the Bengals side of it more than it was the Broncos side of it.
And I think that's why the Bengals have become such a storyline for media over the last couple of weeks, because that's way more interesting than any of these matches.
And I got to be honest, I think the Bills win that game against the Bengals. I don't have any doubt in my mind, but it's an entertaining game nonetheless because two defenses that can't get stops, and I think you're going to be talking about a high-scoring game. What I really don't want to take place is I don't want Steelers versus Texans. I want Steelers versus Ravens in that first round because I think that creates more storylines. Steelers had success against Baltimore. Baltimore whooped them up. That's going to be a much better.
Chargers against Texans is more fun because now I get the Chargers potentially moving on, and I could just sacrifice the Texans in that scenario.
I do think, though, that if the Chargers match up against the Ravens, I think the Chargers could take down the Ravens in the first round.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't trust Lamar. I've made that very clear, and I think Jim Harbaugh and that defense could find a way to stop or at least cause fits against Baltimore.
I think the Chargers are the sleeper team that people want the Bengals to be. Chargers have a franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert. They have a really good coach in Jim Harbaugh. They have a great defense with a couple of blue-chip talents over there. I think the Chargers could make some waves in this. I don't think they could, go to the Super Bowl or anything, but could they win a game or two in this postseason? Yeah, I absolutely think they're the type of team that could do that.
And you talk about storylines.
As a Chiefs fan, I fear the Chargers more than I do the Bengals. Yeah. I'll say that.
You talk the storylines, Chargers versus Ravens, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins against their former team. Everything about Jim Harbaugh brothers. Everything about that matchup would be fun. But I really do not want Steelers versus Texans.
Can I be honest? I don't like the way the first round is going to shape up in the AFC.
This is how it always is, though.
I don't enjoy a lot of these. Well, the NFC
doesn't matter till the championship game.
The NFC, like, you look at the playoff pictures there, and there's some fun teams. Like, I don't know how good Tampa Bay is. They're fun to watch, man.
Definitely. Well, we'll get to them. I want to get to some of the potential matchups. It could be a really fun NFC side of things.
This AFC, I don't enjoy watching the Broncos.
And I think part of that is because we have such a stratified conference. Like, it really is the top three, and then everybody else.
And maybe that's it.
And for me, it's the top two and everyone else.
So, some of these teams, I agree. I do think if I'm a Chiefs fan, I would be more afraid of the Chargers than the Bengals. I hate watching the Chargers play football. I hate watching the Steelers play football. I hate watching the Broncos play football. These teams win the ugly way, right? Where they're playing Iowa-style football where, you know what, you're winning, you don't really care, but man, is it brutal to watch. And I hate seeing that in the playoffs.
All right, we're going to get to the NFC side of things with the BK and Ferrario Rewind coming up on the other side, because that's where the real intrigue is heading into this weekend. Which teams do we believe in? How do we see the Lions versus the Vikings game going? And what's the ideal matchups that we could see in the first round of the NFC side of the bracket? We'll get into all of that as we close things down with the BK and Ferrario Rewind coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
The Blues play on ESPN.
Shoots, he scores!
Tonight, Blues and Senators. Pregame at 6, puck drop at 7.
The wait is over!
The quest for the Stanley Cup happens here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
.101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. Check out either the 101 mobile app or 101ESPN.com for your chance to win a signed puck autographed by Blues defenseman Justin Falk.
Falk shoots it, he scores!
Get entered to win that Justin Falk signed puck right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app, powered by the Schaefer Door Company.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
One of the places where you can find it is the 101 ESPN app. That is, of course, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Center. You can also check it out at 101ESPN.com, or you can watch us on YouTube during or after the show, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. All right, we were talking in the last segment about the AFC side of things with the playoff picture, how things can come together. We all agree. It's definitely the less interesting side of the bracket right now. Now, as we advance, I think it becomes way more interesting than the NFC side. Like, the divisional round should be amazing for the AFC. But in the first round, there's just not a whole lot of compelling matchups potentially there. I feel very differently about the NFC side of things. The NFC, we basically have things determined. The Lions, the Eagles, the Rams, the Vikings, the Commanders, and the Packers have all locked their place into the playoffs. Not necessarily seeding, but those are 6 of the 7 teams. The one spot up for grabs is the NFC South, where it will either be the Buccaneers or the Atlanta Falcons. And the Bucs can lock up that spot with a win and in proposition. And it's the best possible situation that you can be in if you're the Bucs. They are at home, and they are taking on the lowly New Orleans Saints.
Yeah. Who literally aren't starting any of their starters.
They are a 14-point favorite, are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Do we all agree that the Bucs are going to get that spot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about
Don't think they're gonna
who
pull
the
a
teams
Colts.
are in the postseason. It's just a matter of where they end up. Lions versus the Vikings this Sunday Night Football. Let's start out with this one, boys. I mentioned earlier today one of my picks in our Pick'em Challenge. It is my most confident pick, is the Minnesota Vikings to cover the 2.5-point spread as an underdog. And I believe to beat the Detroit Lions straight up. I think they will finish with the number 1 seed in the NFC. I think Kevin O'Connell will lock his ticket, or stamp his ticket as the Coach of the Year as a result of that game as well, and I think he will be more than deserving of doing so after going 15-2 with Sam Darnold as his starting quarterback. How do you guys feel going into that matchup between Detroit and Minnesota? That's the big one. It determines the 1 and the 5 seed in the NFC.
I think Detroit wins it. I think Detroit is going to be able to keep this one-possession game, and I think their offense is going to find a way to outplay Brian Flores' defense, and there's going to be a lot of people being like, oh, wait, is Minnesota's defense that good? And I think this is a critical game for Detroit because they know they need that first week bye. They know that they need to try and rest as many guys as possible to get as many defensive players back as possible. So I think the Lions put it out on this one to get that bye, and I think the Vikings lock up that 5 seed.
Yeah, I think the Lions end up winning this one as well. I understand that they will struggle to get stops, but Darnold, and it's going to sound weird to say, Darnold's still not the quarterback that I'm fearful of, can continue to do the back and forth with Jared Goff. And I think that Lions offense, you're not going to be able to stop them. Even though that is a very good defense, they are just too good offensively. So I like the Lions in this one.
All right. So we're on differing sides of that, but it will determine that game what we see in those first-round matchups. This is where things get interesting as well. So the Rams are not expected to start their starters in this game going into the weekend, which is important potentially for seeding, and it will influence what we get in terms of the matchups. So we all agree the Buccaneers are going to win. We all think that the LA Rams will end up potentially losing that game. If I'm not mistaken, that means that the Buccaneers would end up as the 3 seed, correct, Steve-O?
I believe so, yeah.
So then what you would see is that the LA Rams fall down to the 4 seed, and in your scenario, they would play against the Minnesota Vikings. In my scenario, man, it's going to be another Jared Goff versus the LA Rams scenario, potentially. And that would be an intriguing matchup, certainly, in that first round. Talk about some points that could potentially be on the board. The other scenario here is, let's say the Rams do end up winning. Well, now, in my scenario, I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Detroit Lions. That might be a 45-42 type of a game. I don't know how anybody's getting any stops. So I think that 4-5 matchup, regardless of who's in it, is going to be really compelling on the NFC side of things. 2-7 also could be really intriguing because it will either be the Eagles versus the Commanders for the 3rd time, or the Eagles versus the Packers in a rematch of that Brazil game that we saw earlier in the season.
I hope we get Eagles Commanders. I want a divisional in that first round.
All right, so I'm going to ask you guys, what is your ideal first round? What does it look like? It has to be realistic. It can't be like, hey, I want to see the Vikings against the Eagles in the first round. Okay, cool. That's not happening. But what is your ideal first round matchups in the NFC?
So Lions get the first overall seed, like I mentioned. So Eagles take on the Commanders would be my 2 through 7.
Yep.
And then it would be Rams versus Commanders, and then Rams versus Commanders, and then Buccaneers versus Vikings.
I think for me it would be Eagles versus Packers, and then I think I would want to see
Eagles-Packers is such a good game.
I think I would want
that in the second round.
I would want to see Commanders-Rams. I think Vikings-Buccaneers would be more interesting. I think Commanders-Rams, those are 2 teams that to me are kind of in similar spots, which kind of sounds weird to say, where offensively they're very good. Defensively, there's some question marks. I think you could see potential for a lot of points being put up there. I would worry that the Rams wouldn't be able to stop the Vikings, and their defense would slow them down enough.
But their defense has been playing well lately.
Yeah, but
And the Packers' offense hasn't, it's been good, but it hasn't been that good.
Yeah, I would worry that there's a potential for a blowout if the Rams met up against the Vikings.
So I love most of what the current setup is, which is Eagles versus Packers. I think that could be such a great game. I think it could be so much fun. Eagles play a lot of that cover 2, the static cover 2, and guess what? The Packers are more than happy to do. Take some of those intermediate shots right across the middle, which is how you can potentially beat the cover 2s. That would be a really fun matchup between those two teams. Rams versus Commanders, I think, is a potentially good one. And then I have the Buccaneers as that 4 seed, and then you guys know I have the Lions losing this weekend. So I would have the Bucks versus the Lions, and to me, I would have that Packers-Eagles game as number 1. I would be fascinated to see that Bucks versus Lions game. I think it would be a highly underrated potential matchup. I don't think anybody's getting stops on either side of that thing. You're going to get a crazy number of points. Like if you're playing playoff fantasy football, that is the game that I'm going to be potentially attacking. That's a hell of a lot of fun. So there's some real potential for the first round of the NFC that does not exist, in my opinion, on the AFC.
The amount of go-for-it's on 4th downs between Dan Campbell and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would just be it would be like 17 different 4th down goes-for-it's.
Hell of a lot of fun. There's not a ton of intrigue going into this weekend, but there are a few games that at least matter. Saturday night should be a lot of fun, and then Sunday Night Football could be legitimately one of the best games of the regular season, if not the best game of the regular season. All right, Alex, before we get out of here, Blues back in action tonight. They will have a back-to-back situation. You've got the game tonight, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Brady Tkachuk back in town, going up against the Blues in this one. What are you anticipating over the next couple of days? What are the things that you're most looking forward to?
Well, it's going to be the offense, 5-on-5 play. It's going to be some of these depth players, kind of what they look like. Can you start to improve the special teams? Because it's been eerily just the same from start to finish. But, I mean, more than anything, I'm looking to see them win. I want to see if they can pick up a victory tonight against Ottawa, get a little revenge against a team that put 8 up on them. And then you got another opportunity, the 7th chance to win 3 in a row against Columbus tomorrow night. So I think this one's going to be more of what you saw against the Chicago Blackhawks in terms of net front presence, getting to the front, and it's just a matter of how much consistency can you put into your game, because if you win this one and then you lay an egg against Columbus, well, welcome to being a 500 team, and I am so done with talking about playoffs. We
talked about it at the beginning of the show earlier today. It's the depth of scoring. I want to see, can you have somebody other than your top 4 guys actually step up and get some points on the board for you, because that has been a real struggle for the Blues lately. Kyrou, Holloway, Thomas, Buchnevich in the month of December combined for 25 goals. The rest of your roster in 14 games combined for 18. That's all of the defensemen, all of the other forwards. They've got to get a little bit more on that depth of scoring. That is what I'm going to be looking forward to over the weekend.
Saad's playing at the top line, and I've actually liked Saad's game over these last couple. So hopefully he's one of those guys that you get 1 in and you'd expect about 3 or 4 to follow. The other guy to keep an eye on is Texier. I know it didn't look good against Buffalo on the top line. He's back on the 4th line, but Monty had some pretty strong words about how he's playing, saying, like, look, when he's on his game, he's a top 6 winger in the NHL.
You'll be able to hear that game tonight right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Blues versus the Ottawa Senators. Alex has pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Huge thanks to Bradford Bruns for filling in for us today at the studio. We've been broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. Coming up next, it is time for the Fast Lane here on 101 ESPN.
Make your picks for this week's Fast Lane Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. Show off your football knowledge and see if you can top the Fast Lane and the dudes from the Rizzuto Show on the point. For this week's top score, it's the Fast Lane and the Riz Show throwing down all football season long in the Pick'em Challenge. Enter your picks for this week right now at 101ESPN.com.
Refreshed by Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the NFL. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy.